So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Job 40 discussion with myself, Ashanti, and Dr. Kip Davis. We are going to be doing a lot today. We're going to be going over Dr. Kip's own new translation of Job 40. We're going to be helping to ring in a new year on the Jewish religious calendar because that started last night sometime. We're going to be going over the possible identities for the creature Behemoth. Is it a sauropod? Probably not. Probably not. We're going to be doing a lot of really cool stuff, and I have a great guest today, Dr. Kip Davis, who is currently grabbing something from the kitchen. He'll be right back. Is in fact he's got a PhD in this kind of stuff, right? He is a scholar of the Dead Sea Scrolls. He is an expert on the origins of the Jewish religion, stuff like, Second Temple literature, early Jewish literature, expert on all that great stuff. And of course, you all know Vishanti, who is a regular guest on the channel. And Dr. Kip, why don't you let everyone know anything you want them to know about you, your publications, anything like that. By the way, your channel is linked in the description if anyone wants to go get it. It's also linked in the title of the video, so it's very easy to get to you from this video. I absolutely can. Oh, wait, hold on. They can't, though. Now they can hear you. I'm very a professional, everyone.
Awesome. Yes, very. So, first of all, thank you for the kind invitation to join you on this very fun show and do something a little different from what I'm used to, which is very cool.
I like to do that because I notice that sometimes academics get a little bit tired of the same interview every single time. That's why when I had Josh Bowen on, we didn't talk about slavery. We talked about Sumerian linguistics and grammar.
Yeah, I was literally about to say Josh Bowen with the slavery thing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, my name is Kip Davis. I run a YouTube channel. I have a PhD from the University of Manchester in Hebrew Bible with a specialization in early Jewish literature, history and culture, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Most of my work as an academic is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I have worked on private collections of the Dead Sea Scrolls in Norway, as well as the notorious one at the Museum of the Bible. Whoops.
The one that wasn't.
They're all fakes, by the way. Well, maybe not. I shouldn't say that, otherwise Martin Scoyne might sue me. So most of them are fakes. So there's that, and I also have a course that I sell through MVP courses called Real Israelite Religions: Facts on the Ground and Propaganda in the Bible. And I like to think my work, at least in the public sphere and on social media, I like to think is about better informing people about, in particular, early Judaism, in particular the Dead Sea Scrolls, in particular the ideas about scripture and the transmission of ancient literature, and more broadly, to just counter bad scholarship, which includes virtually all of Christian apologetics. Wouldn't you know it?
Well, that does tie in to what we do here, because while technically this is not a counter-apologetics channel, because most of Christian apologetics I just don't care about. Like, if you're like, oh, hey, the Kalam cosmological argument, I'm just like, I just don't care. I'm going to sleep through that.
Yeah, me neither.
But on the other hand, if you're like, oh, hey, the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and Behemoth is totally a dinosaur, now I'm interested, because those are testable claims that I can check in on. Whereas, like, is the universe too fine-tuned to not have a creator? Like, I don't know how to test that, so, like, whatever.
Genetic entropy.
We can test that one. So,
things that also don't exist.
Yeah. So I think what we should probably do is let's take a look at Job 40, so that way we all are oriented in what topic we're talking about. So, but before we do that, Dr. Kip, can you give us a quick rundown of like what's the point of the Book of Job? When was it written? What's the context? Who's it written for?
Yeah, for sure. So, the Book of Job is what scholars call a theodicy. This is and it's a very extensive, expertly written theodicy. A theodicy is an ancient piece. I guess you could do modern theodicies too, but these started to pop up. Um, in particular, in the Iron Age, there's some that trace back to periods before this, but these were texts basically addressing the question of why bad things happen to good people within Canaanite cultures and the broader ancient Near East, and certainly including the formative text and religion of ancient Israel, which was a Canaanite culture. The common idea, the common theology with regards to who God or the gods were and how they operated was founded on what we call an ethic of reciprocity, which basically means that so long as you're pious and so long as you're obedient to God, you will be successful. Now, considering that most of the high level thinking and writing and navel gazing that took place in this period was done exclusively by super wealthy people,
Don't
who
say.
could read and write. This worked pretty well.
I was assured by every internet atheist that the Bible was entirely composed by Bronze Age goat herders. So, wow, this is new.
I know,
So, are you
right?
saying that maybe the authors of the Hebrew scriptures might have gotten their sort of career started with a small 1,000,000 shekel loan from their fathers?
Yeah, maybe, but
Okay.
also they were probably a lot less dickish than that. Well,
Well,
maybe not
yeah.
all of them, but I don't know. So yeah, so that's kind of sure. That's where all this stuff started. But you don't have to be a cloistered millionaire to notice
Right.
every now and then that there's a lot of people out there who look like they're doing their damnedest and things just don't work out for them.
Mhm.
How do we explain this? So this
Must
is
be
where
sin.
this is where these high level intellectual reflections kind of started.
Okay.
This idea, this pursuit of this question of why do bad things happen to good people. Enter the Book of Job, which features a fictional figure from the very, very distant past. Job is set in what we identify as the patriarchal period. He would have been a contemporary of other fictional characters like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But he was portrayed as a wealthy man, a wealthy, righteous man, who did his very best to ensure that he was always on the right side of the ledger. That he was always righteous. In fact, in the introduction to the Book of Job, one way to read the text, if you look at it carefully, is to see Job as just this incredibly cautious fellow. He is absolutely fixated on this idea of ensuring that he's doing the right thing all the time. He's so cautious, in fact, that he's got a bunch of rebellious kids who like to go out and party, and they can do that because he's like super rich.
Mhm.
So they like to go out and party, and he's so nervous about the fact that they might inadvertently offend the gods, or in this case, his God, Yahweh, that he'll go and offer sacrifices on their behalf just to make sure
Just in
that
case.
that just in case, doesn't even have to know what happened the night before. He's just making sure.
Now,
So
real quick, I do have a question about
Yeah.
the setting of this, and I also want to read a
Yeah.
quick super chat. So, Strawberry Dapper Sinus
Okay.
Pain for $2 says, "Happy you're feeling better, Vishanti," with a heart, a rose, and then I think it's a bundle of tulips. And yeah, I know you do have had a little bit of a sinus infection now, but on the other, at least you're not just asleep for the next few days.
Yeah. Let me
Um,
just give you guys some advice. Don't catch COVID.
Yeah.
0 out of 10. Don't recommend. Yeah, my 3-year streak was broken a couple weeks ago, and I'm
Boo.
still not very happy about that. So.
bummer.
And then I'm just hopscotching from one little thing to another. So yeah, I got straight out of
So-
COVID and went to this. So
So my quick question about the setting is that now it says that Job lived in the East, and I've heard one particular prominent young Earth creationist, I suppose scholar perhaps is an appropriate term, but we'll use it anyway. Say that this means that the setting of Job is perhaps China. What would you say the chances of that are?
I would say 0.
Okay, that's what I
The
thought.
chances of that are 0. So
By the way, that's Kent
um,
Hovind. Kent Hovind thinks that Job is set in China.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
because
That really
anytime you
is.
say the
'cause
East, you mean China.
is that because of the? I mean, maybe maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but is that because of the dragons?
I don't
No,
think so.
you're
It's
just
just
overthinking
it's
it.
just that it's
He
the East,
literally,
and
yeah, he
China
saw the
is
word
East.
and went,
The-
nah, that's
the
China.
only thing east is China.
Forget
Oh, God.
India,
So,
forget Iran, forget
yeah,
all
right?
those places. Nope, just
Yeah.
China.
And I was thinking this probably
So-
just means Mesopotamia because that's east of Canaan, and people knew about it, right? So that's
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
okay.
Correct. And most scholars will tell you that the setting and the dating of this text, Job, is not easy to date.
Right.
There's some difficulty here because there's not a lot of clear clues. There's a handful of clues from the language and from some of the stuff within the book, but it's tough. But most scholars settle on somewhere, in the 6th, 5th, or maybe 4th century
Okay.
BC. So this is they see the text as clearly within biblical parlance post-exilic,
Right.
and this has something to do with the purpose of writing this book down in the first place, because as I mentioned before, all the literature was controlled by a bunch of rich assholes in the period at the time, and all of a sudden all these rich assholes found themselves imprisoned, although it was a bit of a gilded cage,
Yeah.
but imprisoned nonetheless, in a state of enculturation and appropriation in a land far to the east in Babylon.
Oh my God,
So,
Kip.
what?
Composing all my cut to beam inside my gilded cage.
Yeah. There we go.
Thank you. All you Rush fans will get
Thank
that
you. Thank you. So sorry, that threw me off.
It's
Now all
okay.
I can think of is
Well,
Dra-
that's
now all
all
I
right.
can
I'm really
think
good
of
at
is,
I'm good at
is Neil
derailing
Peart. I'm
conversations.
sorry.
I can ask a question to
yeah.
get us back on track. So
Yeah, sure.
All right, so we're writing something in the context of the exile having happened. There needing to
Yeah.
be this this idea about theodicies, because not only are some of the poorer people suffering despite no apparent unrighteousness, but now even the rich people are having a tough time, which that's what you call a
Yes,
dystopia, is when rich
exactly.
people have a bad time. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
so
So
I guess
okay, no, go ahead.
I guess what I want to ask is, like, so what is the basic narrative in a few sentences that gets us up to Job 40 that we could say, okay, so now that we have an orientation in
Yeah.
the
Okay.
setting and the surrounding time of for when it was written, why it was written, what's actually happening in the text that gets us to Job 40?
So God and a figure known as the Satan, or the adversary, who is more like a crown prosecutor, or like a district attorney for all y'all Americans. Uh, so he's part of the court of God. God and him have a discussion about righteousness and about various the fates of various people on earth, and God actually brings up Job as a shining
Throwing
example
Job under the
of someone
bus.
who's always doing the right thing, and they resolve. I would say they resolve together
Mm.
to initiate this test, by which the Satan is given a blank check, a nearly blank check, to basically destroy Job's life.
Yeah, I think he can do
Um,
anything but kill Job.
Yes, he's not allowed to kill him, but he can do just about anything else. So, in a day, Job's his life is wiped out. He loses all of his wealth and possessions through a series of natural disasters. All of his children are killed, um, and he's left. He's left in this state of financial devastation, and he mourns the loss of his children, and he supplicates himself before God, but importantly, maintains that he's completely innocent in this, because he knows what a careful fellow he is.
Right.
So Job is then visited by three of his friends, and together they sit down and they have this long dialogue about the nature of God, and whether or not he is in fact responsible for what has happened to him. I have to point out one other thing. So after all these terrible things happen to him, Job actually, the text says that Job blessed God and didn't sin, and then Satan goes back to God and reports to him what happened, and God says, "Well, I mean, this doesn't look like it's working, so let's inflict him with terrible physical ailments and then see what happens." And so Job and his three friends they're having this discussion with him while he's suffering enormous physical distress from these painful sores and boils covering his body. He's covered in ashes and mourning the loss of his family, and just in this state of destitution. I did want to say one other thing about the dating of this particular text, which I think is really cool. So, excuse me, I'll share my screen here
Okay.
for just a minute, and I'll draw your attention also to the picture in the background, which is the Behistun Inscription in Iran. So this is maybe one of the most remarkable archaeological artifacts on Earth.
Oh, that's so cool.
This
Is that a
this
Huramazda
is
at the top?
I believe so. Yes. So this
Nice.
is an inscription that was drawn up and carved out by Darius the First, sometime in the late 6th, early 5th century BCE. It tells all about his ascent to power. It's written in three languages. Um, I'm not going to get them all right here. One of them is the cuneiform Akkadian or Babylonian language. The other one is like an ancient form of Persian, out of which Farsi emerged, and I think the third language is a form of Egyptian, if I'm not mistaken. So
Cool.
it's it measures over 100 feet long, I think,
Wow.
and like over 80 feet tall, and it's on a mountainside. Like, you'll see on my picture in the background, that it's carved into the side of a mountain. It's some 200 feet up from the ground. And there's an amazing story of when scholars started to actually decipher this inscription, that they were perched on like this tiny ledge at the bottom of the inscription, which is only maybe half a meter, 3/4 of a meter wide. So they're perched up there, and they've got these wooden ladders like strapped together, leaning up against the inscription and climbing up and down to check out all the letters. Yeah, ivory tower scholars indeed. So why do I bring up the Behistun inscription? It's because in one of the texts of Job, in Job chapter 19, verse 23 to 24, some posit that this part of Job's complaint to God might have been inspired by this particular object, where he says, "Would that now my words were written down. Would that now on a scroll there were written." He's petitioning to God and saying, if this stuff was written down, this would bolster my case. "With an iron stylus and lead for all time on a stone inscribed." The thought here being that this remarkable inscription, which was commissioned and then carved out by Darius and his engineers, was so widely known and so prominent in the thinking of the people at the time it was written. It was you have to think, at the time, this would have been seen as maybe one of the most remarkable achievements of engineering and literature in history for these people, that it engendered these sorts of reflections. So sorry, I just love talking about the Behistun inscription, so I take every opportunity I possibly can to do so. I'm going to say one other thing here. I had hoped to get actually a picture of the famous Aramaic Targum of Job from Qumran Cave 11 in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which dates to about, the manuscript itself, I believe, dates to about 100 BCE. The text, some think might go all the way back to the 3rd century. But one of the other really interesting things about the book of Job is that there were a lot of translations of Job into Aramaic. And I think this is significant because it shows, it's thought of as natural in view of the fact that Job came from the East, right? But this is also something that people within the Second Temple period, the Hellenistic to the Hasmonean period, started to do with regularity, was to think of anything that was especially ancient. So stories about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs, stories about Job, stories about Enoch. They started to write all this stuff down in Aramaic, specifically because it was thought that Abraham, the Aramean, they thought this is naturally the language that he spoke.
Right.
So,
And Aramaic at the time was a lingua franca throughout like the Levant, the Middle East, that area.
yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because
Yes, it was the common. So yes, and this was also the common language of Babylon during the time of the exile.
Yeah. I got a couple things to read here from people in the chat. For €5, Inkboy says, maybe if Job would listen more than talk, he would be easier to date. Also, AIG is a bag of baby sausages. Well, thank you very much. On some of my streams, you've probably seen when people super chat that AIG are a bag of dicks, or the equivalent, we take a drink. So, yeah.
Oh.
It's because Answers in Genesis likes to copyright claim any kind of use of their footage, and they like to do it in like waves. So like you'll just be sitting there and suddenly you'll have like 16 copyright claims because you used a little clip of Ken Ham in a few videos or something.
Jeez, eh?
Yeah, they're very annoying.
Hey, can I ask about Sal's bitch made timer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'll explain it real quick. So Sal Cordova is a young Earth creationist. He's
I'm
actually
familiar.
he's been on the channel a few times. I've been on his channel a few times, and I made a series of videos about his mentor slash business partner. Maybe I'm not clear on that. John Sanford. And Sal said that he was going to watch them. Instead, he didn't watch them and then made a response anyway. And I consider that to be bitch-made behavior. So that timer started at the premiere time of the original video, the first video in the series. So,
All right.
And
yeah.
look,
Wow.
that's got my level of petty written all over
That's
it.
because you made it.
That's because I made it. What's up? Yeah, I got really mad because Sal goes, "Yeah, I'll be at the premiere. I'll be at the premiere." And the only reason he said that is because his name was in the title and he's egotistical. So when he realized
I
that
can't
it
confirm
was,
that's the only reason. That's Vishanti's hypothesis.
that's my hypothesis, but he's welcome to prove me wrong at any time.
Oh, yeah.
Just saying. The timer stops the minute that he watches Dapper's video for real.
Mhm.
So
All right.
when he realized that it was calling out John Sanford as either a incompetent or a liar,
Yep.
he got really, really mad, and
Yeah.
he made some butthurt response
No.
videos, which is funny because
Really?
you can't respond to things you haven't watched.
Yeah,
Salvador.
His
Okay.
his first quote response was just to play up what a big brain Sanford was, to which my response is just, great, then I guess he's a liar. Because he's either stupid or a liar. I mean, what other options do I have? But anyway,
Like no other options.
Savage Cobra, the cursorial angiosperm, which, by the way, is a reference to the fact that fruiting plants only occur higher up in the fossil record, and since AIG likes to, and other creationists like to say that, well, animals that are faster fled high upland, so I guess angiosperms were also pretty fast, so they could run up the hills.
They're the Ents.
yeah.
Ancient Ents.
So, yeah, Savage Cobra says, if in my fundamentalist education, Job was nearly universally portrayed as the earliest written book of the Old Testament, would you happen to know why they think so? And I believe that's directed to Dr. Kip.
Yeah, so this has to do with the setting, almost entirely, with the fact that Job is considered to be this very ancient figure from the East. By the way, there are also a handful of literary parallels to the Book of Job, or thematic parallels to what's taking place within the Book of Job, featured throughout the ancient Near East. There's a so-called Babylonian Job, which hold on, let me get my notes here. Yeah, so there's a text called Ludlel Bel Nemki, which basically translates to the God of wisdom has spoken. It dates to about 1000 BCE. It tells of a noble. This is a Babylonian text. It tells of a nobleman who suffers a complete reversal of fortune. He consults the gods, but finds no answer and resolves that the ways of the divine are ultimately inscrutable. There's an even earlier text from Sumer called A Man and His God, which in part tells of a wealthy man who lost everything, endured tremendous suffering, became supplicant before God, but he was ultimately restored. So there's some antecedents here, literary antecedents. There's mention of Job in the I believe it's the book of Ezekiel as this particularly famous ancient figure. So this is where some of that type of thinking comes from.
Right.
I'm convinced of it. So
Yeah,
was there more to that question, or was it just just the early dating?
I mean,
I did want. Can I just say one other thing about that? So while I was still doing my PhD, I also taught at an evangelical Christian university, and I was asked to fill in for an instructor of an introduction to the Old Testament class. Because she was going to be away to the conference, and she told me, she says, "You're not going to have to do anything because I have a special guest coming in to this class. It's Hugh Ross, and he's going to be talking about this new book that he has released, all about Job and cosmology and
I mean,
and all this stuff.
he's not a terrible cosmologist, from what I understand. He's actually a pretty conventional publishing in normal normal
Yeah, but I mean,
journals.
he thinks that Job is talking about dark matter, and no,
I've read
it's
Job.
bad,
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't either.
So I was like, I've heard of Hugh Ross, and I looked up some of his descriptions about the work he was doing in this book, and he is one who was promoting this idea
early
that Job
dating.
was the first book of the Bible ever written. It dates back to like 3000 BCE or something ridiculous like that.
All right, man.
And yeah, so so she told me, she says, you just have to be there and make sure everybody behaves. She said, and then after the class, there are these discussion groups. She says, so could you sit down and lead the discussion group about what just took place in the class? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. So I looked over what he was planning on doing, and I was like, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
So I wrote up a response. I gave it to her. I said, maybe you could hand this off to your students. And she's like, yeah, sure. We'll totally do that, and you can focus on that for your discussion group. And then she sends me an email back, and she says, oh, I just sent this to Hugh Ross as well.
Ooh,
and
interesting.
Yeah, right. So I was like, oh, well, how about that?
He's a big boy. He can handle it.
He can.
Yeah, he really is. So, and I unfortunately, I had hoped to maybe get a chance to actually sit down and have a chat with him about some of this stuff, but I didn't. I was introduced to him right at the very beginning of the class. I shook his hand. He says, "Oh yes," he said. So, Jen, he said, sent me this response that you wrote to some of my work. He didn't seem very happy about it.
Hi, Dr. Kip. Thanks for debunking me and totally obliterating me before my lecture. I just wanted to shake your hand.
Yeah. I might have said some mean things. I don't remember offhand, but yeah. So it's a popular idea. This idea that Job is really, really ancient.
So I also had that idea taught to me, I suppose, in in the Protestant church I went to as a kid. And I think it just boils down to, we don't have a tradition that it was written by some other person, like the tradition that Moses wrote the Torah. So we just assume that it's contemporaneous to the events described, and those seem to be really old. So there you go. It must be really old. Of course, if it's that old, then I guess like the Hebrew text would be translated from like Proto-West Semitic or something like that.
Well, actually, I mean, there are some people, there is a certain now disgraced Egyptologist who parades around on YouTube who has this idea about translation of the Hebrew text from an ancient form of Aramaic.
I know who you're talking about.
So,
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, sure you do. So we can't say his name though.
Look at me. I'm about to explode. I'm trying so hard. I'm just like,
I'm sorry. We should move on.
Okay,
let's move on.
All right. The South Geek 3D, who's been a member for 5 months and is at the Amniel up. Thank you very much, South Geek 3D. Says, shout out to Dr. Kip Davis, who did a great video with Myth Vision. Vishanti, lovely as always. Dapper, best channel in community. Hit like, everybody. Yes, please do hit like, because I'm noticing that less than half of you have hit like, which unfortunately means that now I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
Oh,
you got bilboed. Anyway, DM Confederates killed Pterodactyl's wing for $5. Which,
I love that username.
Yeah, that is great.
Oh
so
my God,
it's become a bit of a thing that my audience likes to update their usernames with jokes based on the most ridiculous things that people I've covered have said. One of which is that some Confederate soldiers shot pterodactyls.
Because that wasn't photoshopped at all.
No,
that's an awesome.
Not even a little.
Picture. Wasn't it from a movie set?
I don't know if it was from a movie set, but I know
it was just like an internet Photoshop.
Yeah, I think it was
these Confederate soldiers with a giant pterodactyl.
Yeah, it's usually paired with a fake Tombstone newspaper, like from Tombstone, Arizona. saying that, oh, these Confederate
Of
soldiers.
course, it's Tombstone,
Well, yeah,
right?
yeah. So
Yeah, I broke into Tombstone once just so we could go visit the cowboy cemetery. So
I paid
gotta
my
keep
way
a
in.
tradition, right?
I paid my
So-
way into the cowboy cemetery.
Well, turns out the cowboy cemetery is not open at like 1 a.m. So, you know,
It's
if you're
true.
only in Arizona that one time,
It's
you know.
true. I was there at like 4 p.m. when it was open.
Just
DM
saying.
Confederate Skill Pterodactyl Wings, so for $5 says, getting ahead on the discussion, but perhaps later we can discuss how Leviathan was definitely a fire-breathing dapper dinosaur. We should definitely.
We're getting there.
All right, so
yeah,
we should.
we're getting there.
It's already been a half hour. We're not even at Job 40. So
Sorry.
It's okay. It's all of us. How does Job 40 fit into the narrative? So we've had these two discussions with Job's friends. First, after his all of his livestock and his children have been killed. Then afterwards, we have all these horrible boils and physical maladies that have been afflicted. His friends come back. They have the same kind of discussion. And then Job 40 is a discussion directly between God and Job. So how do we get to that point?
So in Job chapter 38, and there's the book is very very carefully, expertly organized in terms of a rhetorical argument between these four main characters, Job and his three friends, and they each go through and take turns speaking in order through these various cycles. And at the conclusion of that, we're told that God shows up and speaks to Job out of a storm, and he basically tells Job, all right, you've had your say, you've whined and bitched about all this stuff enough. Let's have it out, just you and me. Let's have a talk about what you think I should be doing and how I'm operating my universe. So, and then through Job chapter 38 through 40, it's basically God dictating to Job the way things are and how he should be responding to him. And then now I'm going to point out as well, one of the complexities within the book of Job is that there are a number of redactional layers. So there's like an earlier version of this text that's been added to, built upon, reinterpreted over a period of time. And the earlier forms of the book of Job basically ended with this, with God coming out and throwing a temper tantrum at Job about what a little bitch he's been, and then
how dare you complain
Job
about all your kids and all your livestock getting killed in one day and then having every horrible malady. Come on, man.
I mean, that's what Goopdu's member chat just said.
Yeah, Job bitch made timer. Come on, Job. Pull it together, man.
So literally hike up your skirts about you like a man. That's
pull up your pants.
Real men don't care about their kids. There you go.
No, they don't. So and the original form of this text just ended with Job going, "You're right, my bad, I'm out." So at a later point in time, somebody then added this epilogue to the story, whereby God then shows up to Job's friends and tells them, "Hey, I don't like the way that you have been going after Job, the most righteous man on earth. You really need to apologize." And then he restores to Job a massive increase of all his possessions. He ends up with even more kids. He's got a couple of additional wives, and everybody lived happily ever after.
Yay!
So, but that whole part, that's all linked.
Seems to undermine the theodicy aspect of the whole purpose of the text.
It completely does. So, and it was added to the text in this later period of time because of a lot of the theological evolution that was taking place within very early pre-formative Judaism,
One of the
where
first
theodicies.
instances of fix-it fanfic.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So, but is it time to get into this?
So yeah, so I want to give a quick little thing.
3
So
minutes.
before this, God does a similar thing to what he's doing in Job 40 with a bunch of different animals. I think like the raven is in there, the lion is in there. I think, was it like antelope or oxen
There's
or
a
something?
bear,
There's a
I
bear,
think.
something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So then we get to Job 40, and
The bear and her sons.
yes. So let's take a look at what Job 40 says, and let's read your, because you did a special translation of Job 40 in two versions just for this episode, and I really appreciate that. We have our I now have a bespoke translation of Job 40.
There you go.
Indeed.
There you go.
Annotated.
I think it's pretty fun too. So so Vishanti said she would volunteer. Are you going to do the
Yes.
honors? Can you?
Okay.
Please
Yeah.
do.
Or are you going to pass out?
No, I'll do it. I mean, if I
Okay.
pass out midstream, obviously it was my own fault for being sinful, and God just struck me down. So
Or you weren't being sinful, and God was just like, screw Vishanti today because, Hashatan, or I guess Hasatan, since I'm always in Arabic mode when it comes to Semitic languages. So yeah, just was like,
So-
what about Vishanti? She's pretty cool. And God was like, all right, let's curse her.
I mean, honestly,
So,
God's whole
before
response
you-
is screw you guys, I do what I want. So
Yeah, before you start, Vish, I have to say though too, people need to know that Vishanti has started doing a vocal work for some of my videos on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and she's so goddamn good at this that I couldn't say no when she volunteered to
it's
read.
almost like I've had training or something.
By the way,
Right.
Knee for $5 says Yahweh's cool with late insertions, but he'll kill you for pulling out early. That is not what the Onan story is about. It is about his failure to do his duty to his dead brother. It is not about coitus interruptus.
And I will just drop a little teaser here. If the Onan story is something you're interested in, then Derek Lambert from Myth Vision Podcast is putting together. But he's putting together a new video all about the very interesting relationship of that story to the succession narrative of David and his family in 1 Samuel 11 through 1 Kings 2. It's wild.
Oh, now we have
Anyways.
people clamoring.
Maybe his case will be a little more evidence than the guy who showed up on his podcast to say that no, Abraham actually killed Isaac. It just, got changed.
Yeah.
We don't have any manuscript evidence for it, but it totally happened, you guys.
Yeah, sure. Now, we do have people
Like,
now
we have
clamoring
tradition.
for Vishanti to read this, so we better get to it or they're going to riot.
Yes, let's get to it.
Okay, Job chapter 40, as translated by Dr. Kill. All right, here we go. Hashem answered Job and said, shall a malcontent argue with Shaddai? Whoever rebukes God must respond. Job answered Hashem and said, see here, I'm tiny. What answer of mine will satisfy you? I slap my hand over my own mouth. Once I have spoken, but I will not respond. Twice, but will not continue. Hashem answered Job from the storm and said, here now, pull up your big boy pants. I will interrogate you, and you will answer me.
That's almost what it says.
It's almost what it says. I
Almost.
paraphrased. His rendering is hike up your loincloth like a man, but that's put on your big boy
It's
pants.
yours is better.
It's true.
Okay, so would you in fact impugn my justice? Do you dare condemn me as if in the right? Have you an arm like a god? Can you thunder with a sound like his voice? So, adorn yourself with pride and arrogance. Be clothed in splendor and majesty. Scatter wide your seething rage. See every proud man and humiliate him. See every proud man, debase him. Trample down the wicked in their place. Hide them together in the sand. Bind their faces in obscurity. Even I would pay you homage. After all, you can save yourself by your own hand. Look here at Behemoth, which I have made like you. He eats grass like cattle. Look here, his strength is in his hips, his power in the muscle of his stomach. He hangs his tail like a cedar. His bones are barrels of bronze, his bones like rods of iron. He is first in the ways of God, only his maker draws near with his sword drawn. For the mountains bring food to him in the place where all the wild animals frolic. He lies down beneath the brambles among concealing reeds and muskeg. Did I get that right?
Muskeg.
Muskeg.
Is that a this is a thing we have lots of in Canada. I don't know, maybe you don't. You
I have
probably
no
have
idea what
no
it is.
muskeg in Arizona.
I don't think we do. We mostly have
I don't think we have it in
saguaro, barrel
California.
cactus,
No.
ocotillo, all stuff that you
Oh,
probably
right,
don't
yeah.
have.
Yeah.
My
I'm
guess
like,
is you,
Southern
you have very
California,
little
we have that.
saguaro up there, right, Dr. Kip?
No, yes, no, none whatsoever.
Actually, it got so hot in Phoenix this year that some of the saguaro died of overheating.
Jeez.
Oh yeah, I saw it. It just wilted.
Yeah.
Do you know how hot it
Oh my
has to be
God.
for a saguaro to just wilt?
Well over 120 Fahrenheit is the answer to that. Because they're used to
We're all gonna
120.
die.
Yeah.
We're
No.
all gonna die.
Look,
It's fine.
Phoenix
It's fine.
is just a monument to man's hubris, so...
Yeah,
yes.
it's true. God.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we
is
need an
muskeg?
explanation of muskeg? Are
Please,
we
I have
good
no idea
here?
what
It's a plant. We'll just
Okay,
go
so-
with it.
it's a plant. Okay. So
No,
all right,
it's
anyway.
more like a swamp or a marsh, but it's very northern.
Oh, okay.
Ours are filled with impenetrable, super sticky mud. So much so that when you drive your Toyota Land Cruiser into it, you need a
Yeah, we don't have
a
So-
goddamn
we don't have those around here.
winch to
It's like
pull
a peat
yourself out of
bog?
there.
We have
Yeah,
we have
yeah.
waddies around
Okay.
here. Does that count?
So okay.
No, that's quite different.
Yeah, no, freaking wadi. Okay. Verse 22.
Continue.
The brambles cover him, his shade. The river willows encircle him. See how the river rages? He is unmoved. He remains confident as the Jordan rushes into his mouth. Can he be captured by his eyes? With snares is his nose pierced? Will you pull Leviathan with a hook? With a rope will you restrain his tongue? Can you put a ring through his nose or pierce his jaw with a barb? Will he be completely subdued before you if you might coddle him with soft words? Will he make peace with you? Will you take him to be your slave for a lifetime? Hashtag the Bible supports slavery. Will you play with him like a bird? Tie him down for your little girls? Will traders barter over him? Will they portion him out among the Canaanites? Could you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with shilshal-dagim? Set your hand upon him. Think of the fight! You will not do it again.
Very nice.
I love that last line so much. Very, very good, Vishanti. That was
All
awesome.
right, we have a couple things to read real quick. Let's see. Titillac Rosie says Behemoth is just a regular old Ferdinand, and that's for a membership milestone chat. Nee says for $2 Behemoth was a tapir, and then sends an eggplant emoji. It's definitely an eggplant. Al Trucker, who's been a
Yes,
member for
totally
6
is.
months and is at the amulet level, says listening to Vishanti describe me so eloquently is neat. Or is this some kind of muskeg story? Nice.
Someone said I could have just said swamp like a normal person. But
Why would you do that?
I'm not a normal person, guys.
You're
Actually,
an academic.
I'm here.
I kind of like the KJV use of the word fen, because that's a fun old-timey word for swamp that you
That
don't
is a
hear too
good
much.
You know what that is? Really?
Yeah, it's just an old-timey word for swamp.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
Can I make a couple of points about my my translation here?
Absolutely. Are they going to correspond to your
yes.
footnotes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I thought I'd go through these. So, and where did they start? I think they start with Behemoth, don't they? Yeah. So look here at Behemoth, whom I have made like you. While I was going through the translation here, there is the construction like you is the pronoun they're referring to Job is actually feminine. Now, this kind of stuff does happen on occasion within the Hebrew Bible as a form of just making the vocalization easier. But when I looked at this right away, I just couldn't help but wonder if maybe this was intentional as a means to undermine Job, Yahweh undermining Job here by emasculating him. You know,
Tracks for me.
Yeah.
look at this.
I see
Look
it.
at Behemoth, who is made like you woman,
Also,
the one who's
Semitic
complaining
languages
about
being
everything.
extra with having gendered second-person pronouns has always been weird to me, and I'm like, why are you bothering? No one else is bothering, but Semitic language is like, no, we're going to keep doing it. thousands of years. Like, okay,
What if I do anyway?
all right, guys, are you gonna gender your first person pronouns? And the answer is no.
No, not
just second and
those.
third.
But there's no need. Listen, there's no need to, because within the ancient Semitic languages, the only people who ever spoke were men.
Oh yeah.
I feel
Right?
like that might not be accurate, but maybe, I don't know.
Deborah,
Well,
Miriam.
within the texts, this was
Yeah.
yeah.
I will say, actually,
So,
there are known real languages in which the sociolect that men versus women use is actually significantly different, and there are major grammatical and lexical changes between the speech of men and women. Like, it is a real thing, so there is that, but it doesn't, as to my knowledge, occur in Semitic languages.
No, true enough.
Get
All
to
right,
verse 16 through 18 so I can tell you about my translation too.
Yes, I was waiting for it and I didn't hear it. Okay, so verse 16 to 18. Look here, his strength is in his hips, his power in the muscle of his stomach. He hangs his tail like a cedar. His bones are barrel of bronze, his bones like rods of iron. So I have a few things to note here. His strength is in his hips. The Hebrew word here is metanayim, and it is with general reference to a person's midsection, hips, and muscles binding to the abdomen and the lower limbs. Within some contexts, this is usually this can be with reference to the genitalia as the locus of male power or virility. Interestingly, it's also used of Yahweh in the book of Ezekiel to describe his great big schlong. So I would propose that this certainly fits here, given what we're going to discover about this creature, the Behemoth. I translated he hangs his tail like a cedar. This could also be stiffens. I would say that regardless of the intended meaning, I think the metaphor is probably again with reference to the creature's virility and is highly likely sexualized. So I translated twice. His bones are barrels of bronze. His bones are like rods of iron. These are actually different words used for bones. And as a result, some translations will say his limbs are rods of iron. But one of the problems in reading this text and other Hebrew Bible texts is grappling with the poetic structure of it, which is Hebrew poetry is all made in parallelism, which is basically stringing together two synonymous statements. The second one providing added detail or just a different perspective on the first one. So I think it's probably just bones in both instances. And then I've got a couple more here. The expression where was it? Will he make peace with you? This is literally, will he cut a covenant with you, which is just the common way of within biblical Hebrew of expressing the making of a covenant or a contract or a vassal treaty. I translated here as well in verse 28. Will you take him to be your slave for a lifetime? This could you might see this commonly translated as forever. Within Hebrew as well, the idea of eternity is not really well established. Usually ideas of eternity are just with the very distant future or the very distant past, or very frequently are meant to just describe a person's own lifetime, which is how I translated it here. And then finally, the very problematic expression "tziltzal dagim." This is the second word there is fish. The first word is tziltzal is completely obscure, and I fumbled around with this word, even all the way through to this morning. I was consulting with some friends of mine about Aramaic translations and Syriac translations of this word. So most translations say this is fishing spears, and this based on the fact that it's a parallelism, right? So they're already talking about filling the Leviathan's skin with harpoons, or his head with siltel dagim. So it's probably some kind of penetrating
Stabby weapon.
fishing tool,
Yeah.
a stabby thing. It's an interesting word though, because this would be the only place where it means that. Most of the time, it just means locusts. In the plural, it appears a couple times to mean symbols, and I think this has to do with just the sound of the word. Symbols, maybe the way they banged metal objects together, could sound like a horde of locusts. The word itself, tiltal, kind of has that sort of onomatopoetic feel to it. And I'm wondering here too if some of the sound of the word has something to do with the nature of the weapon itself. So it's just one of these interesting curiosities that philologists like me look at and will maybe write a book about it. So that nobody will buy. So
we got a few.
That's the translation.
Okay, we got a few things to read real quick. Sean and the Eastim Ankh. Thank you, Sean. It's a reference to a video that just recently went up for early access. It's a doozy. It says Leviathan was a robot from Egypt powered by batteries they bought in Baghdad. Yes, that checks out.
Yeah.
Man. Awesome.
The first Mechagodzilla.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nee for $5 says Muskeg looks like a nice grassy field, but it's the swamp of sadness. Ask me about my 3 years at Fort Wainwright, Fairbanks, Alaska. Yeah, that does sound unpleasant. Goopdo3 for $5 says Dapper, are you going to gender first-person pronouns too? Japanese, hold my sake. It's a little bit more complicated, but yeah, Japanese is actually one of the languages where men and women tend to speak different sociolects that differ even in pronoun choice. But also, Japanese personal pronouns are just nouns that get used as pronouns in an effort not to be rude, and then they become rude because they're being used as pronouns, and then you grab new nouns. It's one of the only languages that has frequent personal pronoun turnovers, because it's considered rude to refer to people with pronouns, so you grab nouns that are just standing in as pronouns until they become pronouns. And this is a documented history of happening several times in the written history of Japanese, where there's just rampant personal pronoun turnover in an effort to avoid being rude. It's one of the more bizarre things to have ever happened in linguistics that I'm aware of, because usually, personal pronouns are considered to be a very closed set. You don't easily add or subtract them from a language. But Titalac Rosie for 20,000 Vietnamese dong says, yes, Electrical Egypt, aka the Horus Heresy.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the more and less ridiculous ideas for what Behemoth can be.
Wait, because I want to discuss my spin on verse.
Oh, yes, please.
So in the 40th chapter, verse 15, God starts talking about hey, look at Behemoth. He's super awesome, unlike you. That's the implication. Where he's using emasculating grammar. It's well, hey, Behemoth can handle all this stuff. Why can't you? Puny human.
I like that God's a Ferengi in this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just human. So saying oh, look at how strong his belly is, look how massive and all this stuff. It talks about his tail, and then it gets to verse 18.
Tail.
It's verse 18 kind of threw me off, because whenever I see parallelism in the Hebrew text, I start looking for why they picked the words that they did, because whenever you're writing a text, intent goes into it. You don't
Mhm.
just
it does.
arbitrarily pick words. Some people will pick things based on like onomatopoeia, some people base on rhyme, some of them will be linguistic puns. There's all sorts of reasons why they'll pick the words that they do. So the first thing I start looking for is like, do they rhyme? Do they have a slightly altered spelling that might make it a pun somewhere? Because that happens a lot. And what I noticed is like the first word, etsem, which is bones, is pretty straightforward. It's
Mhm.
just bones, like your bones.
Yep.
No big deal. There's not really a whole lot going on there. But the second word, getem, it's translated often as bones, but it's a different connotation. The word is not very often used in the Hebrew text, but in one specific instance, it discusses men sitting by the temple and they put their like cloaks underneath themselves so they can sit down on what is translated in English as bare steps, and they're talking or whatever. So I started thinking, okay, in an agrarian society,
Mhm.
people who are very closely tied to the land, what would be the difference between these two words? What would make someone think of the word that's also used to describe bare steps? And I started reading like the Hollowed. It was talking about essence or skeleton. And I thought, hey, what if this is just a really poetic way of saying he's strong? And
Mhm.
so when I rendered this verse, it was almost identical to what Kip had. I rendered it, his bones are bronze channels, his skeleton like iron. And the parallel there, I specifically picked the word channels because that word is used often for like river gorges or like
Yeah.
cuts in a ravine. And you're getting the image that this guy is so strong, this animal is so strong that the marrow of his bones contains bronze. Like his bones themselves may as well be iron forged, bars, and they're so strong that even the marrow is made out of metal. Like this dude he is it. You cannot assail this creature. So the short
And
version is he's strong, but I like the imagery of having iron bones filled with like copper or bronze, because marrow, you break open a bone and you get the marrow, and that's like the essence or the nutrients part of like the
And
bone.
then you put
right?
it in the oven, and then you spread it on toast.
Correct. But yeah, it's like a human bone would have soft, squishy marrow, that's tasty. Behemoth would have iron bones with like bronze filling in the worst Cadbury cream egg ever.
I was not, by the way, speaking
Right.
about cannibalism when I mentioned cooking and eating marrow. That was a Vishanti original there. Christine V, who's been a member for 4 months, is at the
Nice.
tetrapod level, says, I had never considered Behemoth's eggplant until today. Because yes, we're talking about eggplants.
You know what you can do?
You bet
Anytime
we
you're
are.
reading the text, start asking yourself, can I make a dick joke out of this? And a lot of time the answer
Most
is
of the time you
yes.
can.
Yeah. Nee for $2 says, Muskeg is onomatopoeia for hopscotch clump clump, which sounds like what you're doing is you're trying to traverse it on foot. Guptu for $2 says AI. Guptu 3 for $2 says AIG is a bag of hips/bones. Thank you very much. All right, so
It's
let's.
I have to say, after Vishanti's very clear and I think accurate description of the bones described in verse 18, you have to wonder why AIG didn't think that when they got the soft tissue from
right.
the dinosaur bones.
Yeah, why wasn't it actually
Why
bronze?
wasn't that copper?
Yeah. Why wasn't it copper? Come
I
on,
mean,
guys.
technically there was iron
bronze.
in there, so
Yeah.
maybe that's.
Oh, there's iron in the blood. See, the Bible knew
iron
science
there.
before we discovered it.
Yeah. There it is. All right, so speaking of which, AIG is one of the groups that likes to say, in fact, it's not just AIG, right? It's Answers in Genesis, Institute for Creation Research, Genesis Apologetics, Creation Ministries International. All of these have their prominent speakers who have said things along the lines of, I think that Job 40 describes a sauropod dinosaur when describing Behemoth. Now, for those of you who might not know, sauropod is the term for what some people call the long-necked dinosaurs. These are the quadrupedal dinosaurs most prominent in the Jurassic, although they do straggle on until the end of the Cretaceous. And you might know them from the movie The Land Before Time as, in fact,
Littlefoot.
the Longnecks, the group to which
Yeah.
Littlefoot belongs.
Oh, right.
Hey,
Yes.
Dapper.
Okay.
Did you notice any description of any necks anywhere in this text? What about you, Dr. Kip?
No, I did not.
Is the word for neck anywhere in that chapter?
Absent.
Well,
Weird. So the defining feature of a sauropod being its neck.
Nope.
Well, so let's take a look. So one of the biggest arguments, and I'll play devil's advocate as being like the proponent of sauropod as Behemoth. So one of the biggest arguments is that when the text compares the tail of Behemoth to a cedar, well, cedars are quite large trees, and most of the other options that people have given, at least within Christian interpretations of Job, which, to be fair, that's the angle from which all of these groups are coming at this from, so I would expect them to compare other Christian interpretations. They'll say, like, hippos and elephants are the other frequently cited animals, and they have relatively tiny, wispy tails. So a sauropod tail makes sense. So what do you think about that argument as for, Behemoth must have had a gigantic sauropod-like tail?
Well, I think this is where I wonder if this is where I have seen a couple of suggestions that this could also be a crocodile.
Okay.
And I wonder if that's where this comes from. Something else that I wonder about too is because it just says he either stiffens or hangs his tail like a cedar, is strange if you're thinking about like the whole tree, right? And when you, because we have I think this is the other thing too. Most of us living in North America tend to think of, when we think about cedar trees. I live in the on the west coast of Canada, and
Pacific
we
Northwest
have
for
the Pacific
Americans.
Northwest.
Yeah.
There you go. We have these gigantic red cedars everywhere that grow to like 250 feet tall. They're so big,
Gigantic, relatively straight up,
and totally straight, massive trunked trees. You cut them down, you can make a dance floor out of them, literally.
Yeah.
You can drive your cars through them in California. So like they're massive, straight, huge trees. These are not the same,
right?
as
So
the cedars that dominate the landscape of the of the Mediterranean.
Those would be the Lebanese cedars
on the west coast.
Yeah.
The Lebanese cedars,
which famously is on the flag of Lebanon. Like if you look at the flag of Lebanon, you can see a Lebanese cedar, and it does not look like a giant single trunk straight up into the sky tree. It's a very branchy, curly, shortish tree.
Yeah. So what is this pertaining to? If it's got in mind, and I'm going to keep qualifying here, if it's got in mind that this is an animal that Job is looking at, just out there, I think if that's the case, then it would more likely have something to do with the way the tree moves, or which would be more indicative of branches and needles or leaves or that sort of thing. So, and I believe I have seen some commentators suggest this actually works if you're describing a hippopotamus or an elephant swishing his
I was going to say,
around,
have you
like
seen a hippopotamus poop?
Yeah, they flail their tail around.
They just and they fling their poop.
So I don't know.
Their tail.
Is that something that's going on here? so I would say I think I don't think it works well. But I think it works better than imagining this gigantic
Yeah.
this
Now-
enormous scale.
Now
I think
you're
it's talking about his genitals personally.
well. I mean, there's also that possibility. Now I'll say, Dr.
And
Kid,
even
you're-
there,
you
if
can
he's
be
talking about his genitals, then
Job chapter
pick an
40.
animal.
God rolls up to Job and says, "Hey, check out Behemoth, big dick energy."
so.
Yeah.
Well, here's another possibility. Let's say we might have descriptions that are contemporaneous to the composition of Job that are more explicitly clear of it being a sauropod. Are you aware of any other, say, ancient Hebrew literature that might more clearly describe a sauropod that we could say, well, see, they knew about sauropods, so this might be what Job is talking about, or well, what God is talking about in Job here?
Well, I can't think of any.
No, darn it! I was so hopeful.
I'm sorry.
The more I
I'm
read the
sorry.
text and like the more I watch like actual proper, biological documentaries and stuff, especially Casual Geographic, he does a really good job. The more I learn about those types of things, the more I'm like, this has got to be a hippo. It has to be.
Well, so that
Because crocodiles are, they live in the water and,
Mhm.
they got a pretty
Right?
significant tail and their jaws
Yeah.
look pretty big, but you can hold a grown person can just hold a crocodile mouth shut.
Yeah.
They take more it takes more
True.
effort to open their jaws than it does to clamp down on it. So you see people, holding their snout and just kind of rolling around with them. But a
Don't recommend.
hippopotamus jaw, you've seen those things bite
Oof.
canoes in half. They can snap,
hippos
branches
kill
of
more
trees,
people
like,
per
they're-
year in Africa than crocodiles do.
They're
Wow, eh?
murder. They're
See, this is-
watery murder horses. So
Boy, I had no idea.
Yeah, hippos
Wow.
are basically the second most deadly animal in Africa after the mosquito.
yes,
I'm
They
not.
are
I'm
killing
not kidding.
machines.
Yeah,
Incredible.
they are absolute
Wow.
killing machines.
yeah. Do not.
Wow.
Hippos have been known to kill lions for just getting too close.
Jeez, eh?
Yeah, lion
Their-
versus
Yeah,
hippo.
bite
The
force
hippo wins.
is
That's
ridiculously strong.
So actually,
see,
that
that fits.
and that's what I want to transition into, because the more common, and I'm sticking with Christian interpretations here that I see,
Mhm.
because let's remember, young Earth creationism, which is what I talk about a lot on the channel, but it's a fringe thing within Christianity, right? That is not the mainstream view of Christians, is that, oh, this must be a sauropod, and Noah's Ark was literally 4,400 years ago, and like that's not the common Christian idea behind all of this. So the more common ones that I do see are hippo and elephant, and I do think that it's an interesting take in that I think it's a better fit for the description, especially hippo, in that we have Leviathan as something that will sometimes go into the water, whereas sauropods actually, this is an interesting thing, physically.
You mean Behemoth?
Yeah, Behemoth, sorry. Sauropods physically couldn't really submerge themselves in water because they couldn't actually breathe because of how long their necks are. They couldn't actually draw in air under that much pressure. So
They're gigantic too, right?
oh yeah, they're much
Like-
much
And they're
bigger.
hefty boys.
So-
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
like,
talking
so
about
that's the-
animals 5 or
that's
6
the
times
other
taller
thing.
than an elephant.
Right, like that's the other thing about this text is that Behemoth. I'm just gonna pull up the text here again. Behemoth. Where is it? It says here he lies down beneath the brambles
Yeah.
among the concealing reeds.
You have to be a
They
pretty small.
cover
You
him.
have to be a pretty small
Right?
sauropod to get
The-
covered by reeds.
The river willows encircle him or surround him. It's like it's his
It's a blanket.
it's his yeah exactly.
Just
It just so something else I want to point out here too, just from a linguistic perspective, the word behemoth, the Hebrew word, is a plural form of behemoth, which is the common word used of cattle
Mhm.
or domesticated animals. So this and what this is, when it's used in Job like this is a superlative form of that. It's the same thing that's going on, and I want you to think about this as we walk through this. It's the same thing that's going on in the text when it renders the singular word for God El as Elohim,
Right.
which is a plural form, but always with, or 99% of the time with reference to this single superior, ruling
And isn't it
god.
also usually using like singular adjectives or verbs when that's the subject
Yes.
of the sentence and whatnot? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's
And
morphologically a
there's
That's how
plural.
you know, right?
But
Job
yeah.
opens with a scene in front of the divine council. So there's yet another tie to like, why is Elohim plural if the Bible's monotheistic? It's like, well, it's technically not, but okay.
So I guess what we're saying there is that just the name itself, it's like this is the most cattle-y of cattle that has ever cattled.
Yes.
It's Paul Bunyan's ox.
Yes. Exactly.
Yo! Paul Bunyan confirmed.
Okay. So that's actually one of the things I want to get into, is because now my interpretation has been, ever since I, not that long ago, completed a video in which I spent more time than I care to admit trying to figure out exactly as much as I can about this text and Behemoth and all of that. So my conclusion was basically that I had already known that Leviathan was basically a cosmic chaos monster that was sort of the embodiment of the primordial waters of creation that God creates the world out of, even in Genesis 1, but we see a more explicit like chaos conf thing in the Psalms, in which God kills the fiery serpent
199.
Leviathan, the twisting fleeing serpent,
Form.
and then
Isaiah
Yonder.
is
Right.
all over the place.
So Leviathan being this feminine chaos serpent that lives in the water, Behemoth becomes, or is, a masculine dry land or desert animal that is also sort of a cosmic monster that is not a group of animals that, is just going to be running around in the fields that Job is looking at. It's this great entity of mythical power that Job has heard of off in the desert or something, but it's not something that he's going to encounter every day. So is that a reasonable interpretation of Behemoth?
Very importantly here too, think about this. Like these are animals that no human can have mastery over.
Right. You literally can't catch it.
That is the point. Like God is sidled, as Vishanti said, God himself is sidled up to Behemoth with his sword drawn. I love the way it's my favorite, maybe my favorite part of this whole chapter. I love the way that chapter 40 ends when describing Leviathan, and God says basically, go ahead, put your hand out, touch him, you'll not do it again.
F around and find out, Job.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like these are, and I'm fairly sure. I mean, I don't know anything about anthropology or the relationship of ancient peoples to animals, but I tend to think that by the Iron Age, or certainly approaching the Persian period, human beings had killed hippopotamuses, crocodiles, and
so we actually know of there are mummified hippos and crocodiles in Egypt.
Right.
So that not only had
they,
in fact, not only were there mummified crocodiles in Egypt, there are temples where it is known that they kept breeding populations of crocodiles for sacrificial and mummification purposes.
Crazy.
Right. So, like, this is definitely a thing that happened. Now, granted, these were still known to be very powerful, dangerous animals. That's why, like, the scariest supernatural monster in Egyptian mythology is basically a hippo with a crocodile face.
Yeah.
So,
for good reason.
Right, for very good reason. But yeah, they did actually manage to keep captive populations of these animals for ritual purposes. So, like, we know that that's the case. Now, I also want to point out, DM Confederates Kill Pterodactyls Wings for $2 says, I've also heard Behemoth was an aurochs, which I also think is a reasonable thing. And if you want to say that it's an extinct animal, I do think it's one of the better options, because one, it is like, the aurochs are the wild ancestor of modern cattle, right? And these were generally more aggressive, bigger, and stronger than domesticated cattle for the reason that, they
Wow.
were wild animals. It's sort of like comparing like an American bison to a cow. Neither of them
Yeah.
are like
All right.
safe
Yeah, wow.
animals, but like one of them is way more dangerous than the other, and it's the bison, trust me.
It's
Um,
a tank
What-
with legs.
where I grew up, so I wanted to mention this as well. So I'm from Calgary, which is just on the other side of the mountains where I live now. Calgary is about an hour and a half drive away from one of the coolest places on earth, which is the Royal Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology, located just outside of Drumheller. So we used to go there like every year. So that's cool. But Calgary is also within like 150 kilometers of the head smashed in buffalo jump. Which
good
is
name.
which is
That is a good
yeah.
name.
This is a historic site in just south of Calgary. It's basically like a box canyon where the I think these would have been the Pagan or the Cree
Oh yeah.
Indians would drive entire herds of bison
It's over the cliff.
over the edge of the cliff
Mm.
whenever they were hungry.
Hey, I mean, it's a good way to get some meat right there. You'll
I'm
have
just
plenty.
saying, if it comes down to squaring off with a massive several thousand-pound behemoth, or just running them off a cliff and letting gravity do the work.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah. Gravity's handy like that. We have a
Terminal
couple more
velocity.
things. Nee for $2 says Behemoth equals blue hippo. We could go to
Blue hippo.
Blue hippo. Discovering Ancient History with Pat
Nice.
Lowinger for $2 says Cosmic Chaos Monster for the win. Yes, Cosmic Chaos Monsters are
Yeah.
pretty cool. And actually,
So
I
this-
appreciate that Tiamat even made it all the way into D&D as a dragon who's a chaotic evil dragon, which I just appreciate
Oh.
that. Like, you know what? Good job, Dungeons and Dragons. I appreciate it. To the lack... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I was unfortunately such a sheltered child. I was not allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons because of the Satanism.
I actually I ended up writing like an essay for my parents in order to get them off my back about playing Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. And that was for the same reason. It was because of the Satanic Panic. Because I started to
Yeah.
play right at the tail end of the Satanic Panic. Is when I started picking it up. Tilak Rosie for 20,000 Vietnamese Dong says, "Oh hey, elephant is also tank." Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the other options that's sometimes put forward for Behemoth. But what I would like to know is, Dr. Gibb, what do you think as because you're basically a scholar of all of this stuff. What is the scholarly consensus on all of this stuff?
So, in my opinion, and I believe this is the scholarly consensus. There's a number of very important clues about this text, or within this text, regarding how to identify these creatures. I mean, we've hinted at a few of them already. So one of the important clues is that, like, this is the end of God's speech to Job. You know, he starts off going through the operation of the cosmos and the various elements of nature that are inscrutable to mankind. He scales up to, talk about the skies and the far reaches of the natural world that people knew of at the time. He then embarks on his tour of, where he talks about the various natural animals, and ends on this climax with these two creatures, with Behemoth and with Leviathan. Leviathan, we know from numerous texts within the Hebrew Bible, but also from other Canaanite texts, texts that were discovered at Ugarit, or modern-day Rosh Shamra, which preserve all sorts of really, really interesting mythological literature of the wider Canaanite cultures. We see the same creature there.
Yeah.
He's actually got the same. He's called Lotan.
Right, it's
and
got
he
an
is- he
etymologically
is-
related name.
Yes, is the same. It's the same creature, you know, and it's the he's the fierce adversary of Baal and Anat, in their pursuit of cosmic supremacy. So right at the outset, we know that Leviathan is a cosmic mythical creature, one of these creatures who is featured in stories of creation. It seems much more likely to me that we need to think of Behemoth in the same context. The best way to translate this word Behemoth, if you were going to render it into English, is just great bull.
Yeah.
And perhaps this could be identified with the bull of heaven.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
slain by
weren't there some Akkadian like legendary figures who slayed a great bull of heaven at one point? Yeah, like maybe like Enki and Gilgamesh, right?
Yes. So they have these encounters with the bull of heaven, Enki and Gilgamesh. In the Ugaritic creation text, there's a number of them, and very interestingly, the same sort of creature is featured there, but then always or most frequently paired with Lotan, which is exactly what we see here. This is a you mentioned this before. Leviathan, Lotan is sort of is in the same genre of divine figures as Tiamat from the Enuma Elish, who is a female watery chaos deity. I think you have here likely this juxtaposition of the watery female chaos monster and the land-born male chaos monster, the beast of the earth. Which I think raises there's another interesting text that's much later, the book of Revelation, chapter 13, the Apocalypse of John, does this same thing, where he juxtaposes the beast of the earth against the beast of the sea. It's a common motif or a trope,
right,
within all these various cultures to pair these creatures. They certainly look similar in terms of how they're described.
They're both unassailable.
Yes, these unassailable cosmic monsters that God is telling Job no human being can handle these creatures.
Right.
We can't call them animals because they're like gods. So and I was going to say this. So like this is where God's speech ends. He's hit the climax on these two fearsome cosmic creatures that were part of the very creation of the cosmos. Within the ancient Near Eastern worldview, the creation of the universe doesn't happen without the vanquishing of these creatures.
Yeah, which we even see was it Psalm 99? Is that the one that has the
Psalm 89?
89.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Which I believe is actually 90 if you're using the Septuagint ordering, because the Septuagint splits up two earlier Psalms and then combines a later one if you're going by the Masoretic ordering. So yeah.
Yes.
Which, by the way, depending
messes up Job 40 as well. So
which depending on which Bible you're using. If you're using a Christian Bible, there are some that actually do use the Septuagint ordering. It's more common in Eastern Christianity to follow the Septuagint ordering, even if you're translating from the Masoretic.
Yes, it's true. So, but I wanted to on this point, I think I wanted to finish up with what was probably the very end of the book originally, which is Job's response to God after he's basically called him out and told him he's a great big pussy and he needs to man up. So this appears in the opening parts of chapter 42, and Job says, verses 2 to 6, he says, "I know that you are capable of everything. No schemes are beyond you. Who is this darkening my counsel with a dearth of knowledge?" And here he's self-reflecting, because this is what Yahweh said to Job when he first approached him. He said, "Who is this that darkens my counsel? As if, who are you to challenge me? To wit, I have held court, but I do not understand. Things are too difficult for me, so I don't know." And then he's kind of parroting himself and going, "Listen now, I myself will speak. I will interrogate you, and you will reveal unto me." Here he's basically parroting what God told him in the beginning. And then he ends with this. He says, "By my own ear, I have surely heard you, but now my eye has seen you. So then I relent, I repent in dirt and ash." The end. And I think when we were talking about this off screen, I think Vishanti hit the nail on the head here, where the best way to read this entire exchange between God and between Job, and Job's response to that, is with your tongue firmly planted in your cheek and with a heavy dose of sarcasm.
Wait, are we saying that there might be some kind of like tendency towards sarcasm in some Hebraic literature that's out there? That seems very out of character.
Quite possibly. I'll read this one thing here. So the whole message of the book of Job is that in short order, people suffer, or they do not within the grand design of God, which is none of your fucking business.
Pretty much.
You suffer or you don't, and just deal with it. This message provides little or no comfort. If Job's experience is at all indicative, then such misfortunes are either the result of some cosmic contest between God and his celestial cohort, or part and parcel of the unfathomable ways of the Almighty, and therefore utterly beyond human comprehension. Reading this book from Job's perspective then locks the reader into a conceptual stalemate that is impossible to resolve. And that's from an introductory text by Stephen Bridge. But I think my favorite response here to what's going on in Job's final response to Yahweh is that his contrition before Yahweh is a form of resentment with regards to how God has basically bullied him into a corner here like this. The best way to shut up a blustering tyrant is just to say whatever it takes to make him stop talking.
Yeah. And I think one of the important things is, if your complaint is, hey, unjust things have happened to me, it's not really a defense to say, well, yeah, but I'm powerful enough to do unjust things.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay, but like that doesn't help.
This is one of those things, like we were discussing before the show went live, as there are a lot of people who would do well to read more sarcasm or more sardonic things into the text, because when you read it straight, it really does like make God look like a dick, which I don't have a problem with. I'm Jewish. We'll fight God in the back of a Denny's parking lot. Well, so
yeah, but then he'll cheat by paralyzing your thigh.
And he'll cheat by, paralyzing your thigh freaking OP, please nerf. But like the whole thing about, chapter 40, it is God rolling up and going, "Oh, big baby mad that stuff happens to you. I mean, you're welcome to try to tame these big scary monsters. I'll wait." And then Job lets him finish all of that. And Job goes, "Oh yeah, you're right. I'm just a dumb human. What do I know? Totally my fault. My bad. You're the big, strong, you could do whatever type guy. It's fine. I'll just sit over here and..."
We got a couple
and
things
be
to
over
read
my
real
area,
quick.
but what I was
go
going to
ahead.
say before you read that
Okay.
is there's not just a reason that it ends that way for the reader. It's also God saying, "Stop being such a whiny bitch." And when Job's like, "Oh, big strong man, like rolling up in here," then it's like, okay, yeah, it's okay to be sardonic back. If you were going to read it that way, it would be saying, hey, if God starts mouthing off to you, or if something bad happens to you, it's okay to get a little upset about it. Mouth off back. Like, don't just take it lying down. My goodness.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
DM Confederates Killed Pterodactyl's Wing says, actually, since Job is Chinese, it was 100% an Asian elephant. Nah, there you go. That solves the problem right there. Which actually I'll mention it real quick. Another Kentovendism is that Leviathan is in fact a T-Rex.
Oh yeah, of course, right?
There are very few animals as well suited to life in the ocean as a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah.
I can't even finish the sentence. Knee for
T-Rex known for wriggling around like a serpent.
Right.
Yeah.
Knee for $5 says, you can't play Dungeons and Dragons. You'll summon a demon. Here, just study these lost scrolls in an ancient language. Klaatu Baratan Nekta. There you go.
Oh no! Don't do it. You summoned all the bad stuff from Evil Dead.
Yeah, or you just deactivated Gort. That's also a possibility.
Oh yeah, or you just turned Gort off. Yeah. Either way.
Savage Cobra, the cursorial angiosperm for $5 says, that's impossible. Jewish people never engage in sarcasm or argue about the meaning of texts. True. Absolutely true. That is not a thing that occurs.
Ever.
Totally foreign.
Yeah. So
it wouldn't be in our name or anything.
Yeah, there's definitely if there's one thing I know about Judaism as a whole, it's that it's full of consensus. All over the place.
Univocality across the board.
Yes, absolutely.
The South Geek 3D for €5 says, Behemoth is just a Gorudon who's clearly a theropod, possibly even a ceratosaur. Prove me wrong.
Prove me wrong.
I don't think I can prove you wrong, But I do want to put one last counter argument. This one I am getting from Bodhi Hodge, that is Ken Ham's son-in-law and Answers in Genesis speaker. Yeah. So now Bodhi Hodge actually in a talk that he did not that long ago, that I actually have an early access series out about. So if you want to, join the Patreon or anything out there, you could access this series of videos right now. Just, little capitalism time here. But one of the arguments that he puts forth, because he contends with maybe Behemoth and Leviathan are just mythical creatures, is that, but this is in a series of, speeches from God in which he talks about all of these animals that we can easily identify as real animals, like ravens and bears and whatnot. So why would the text switch to mythical, monstrous entities instead of continuing on with known animals? So why is that?
So one of the enormous misconceptions that people, Richard Carrier, has with...
This is not a Richard Carrier-friendly channel, so feel free to dunk on Carrier.
With
what's he going to do? Write a blog about it?
Yeah, basically.
Yes, he will. So one of the massive misconceptions that people have with regards to these ancient religions, early Judaism, and people need to understand too, we're kind of dealing with, in terms of the book of Job, we're dealing with a text that's sort of at the nascent beginning of what scholars would identify as early Judaism. And I do want to say something about that here after this. But so within this period, there's no hard and fast line between what's going on Earth and what's going on, in the realm of the gods. And that must be abundantly clear if you just start from the beginning of the goddamn book, which opens which opens in God's house, and then moves back and forth between them. I mean, in chapter 37, that Job and his buddies are just talking, and then all of a sudden God speaks to him out of a storm.
Yeah.
And it goes like that. He's there. Oh, he's right there.
Yeah, this isn't like,
so what do you,
it's a fairly normal occurrence. It's not like, oh my goodness, God's in the storm. It's like, yeah, God just came by to chat from a storm.
There he is.
There
But
he is.
this is the way things worked back then. Things that happened within the cosmic realm, or the realm of the gods, are things that happened within our realia. Like, this was part of the natural world,
Right.
because they don't have this sense of like an ethereal, non-physical cosmos. It's not a thing. So of course there's this movement back and forth between, the storehouses of snow and hail, and Orion's belt that you just unbuckle, and the bears and the ravens, and there's Behemoth, who's did that does that
So
appear
that definitely
in
does.
this part of the, like, at one point it says here within the text, I just gotta go back and read this because maybe we didn't pay close enough attention to this. The mountains bring food to him in the place where all the wild animals frolic.
Yeah.
He's right there.
Yeah.
Now, one real quick thing, and then I do have a bit of a follow-up there, is Savage Cobra, the cursorial angiosperm for $2, says, he, Richard Carrier, might get slightly whiny in the chat too. Yeah, I saw that. That was hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
What happened?
We were talking about Richard.
No, he's not here, but I think it was
Oh.
your talk with, was it Jordan? That he got a little
no,
whiny?
it was on Deep Drinks.
Deep
Oh,
Drinks.
yes,
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was
I
there
got
in the
some
chat.
shots
Yeah,
in.
no,
I'm pretty
no.
proud of myself. Like, it's very
yeah,
rare I
yeah.
get to make a complete ass of somebody who considers themselves a serious scholar, but
I think that was your first exchange with
it was,
with
and
the immortal Richard Carrier.
yeah, and it's okay because he was I totally bodied this guy with
And-
Google, nonetheless. Like,
I actually get requests to cover Richard Carrier, and I'm like, so many other people are doing it so much
Why?
better than I would. So like, I'm just gonna let
Why
them
waste
do
the
it.
time?
Yeah. So
like, and me asking him and other people asking him to his digital face, like, hey, did you read this? He's like, well, someone else did that, and I read them, and it's like, dude, shut up.
Yeah.
Shut up.
All right, so
Oh,
I
God.
do want to have a follow up on the cosmic monster versus ordinary animal kind of thing,
Mhm.
because I think now I'm trying to be generous to what Bodhi might say, because I don't think he would accept that as an answer, right? And I'm using Bodhi as sort of a stand-in for young Earth creationists broadly, right? The kind of people who would say that Behemoth is a sauropod. And my counter would be, okay, so I hear you that at this time there was not a clear distinction between like a physical world and a spiritual realm or anything like that. Fair enough. Okay. But you're still saying that what's being depicted here isn't an ordinary animal, right? There's a category distinction between what you're describing as these cosmic monsters and what I think was being described, which is just another one of the animals, but an even bigger animal than the previous ones described. Because let's be fair, sauropods are a lot bigger than bears. Can't deny that. So
True.
why do we think it's appropriate to make this category switch after talking about all of these more ordinary animals, even within the context where we don't think of a cosmic, ethereal, spiritual realm versus a mundane physical realm? Why do we have that category switch then?
What a frustrating question to answer. I'm sorry. I don't know how to respond to that beyond just pointing out that within, like, let's ignore, cosmic animal versus cosmic creature versus natural animals for a minute, and let's just look at how God is described and interacts with people throughout various texts in the Bible. Excuse me. So in Genesis chapter 2 and 3, God gets down in the dirt and literally fashions a man and then a bunch of animals
Mhm.
out of the dirt with his hands. Then he's walking around in the cool of the day, looking for his new favorite buddies. In later on in the book of Genesis, um, Abraham has some domestic issues with his wife and her slave girl that she gave to him so that he could rape. And she is I think in this version she storms off, leaves Abraham and his family, and she goes to a well and has a face-to-face conversation with God, who shows up at the well. Then in Genesis chapter 18, Abraham sits down with God and with two of God's friends and makes dinner
Has a
for
whole
them.
meal.
Mhm.
They have a meal and they have a
Mhm.
talk, and then God's friends go and they hang out with Lot in his house. They avert a homosexual gang rape and then destroy the cities. Uh, then it in one of the stories of Moses, um, he God is standing on top of the rock. He's just standing there when Moses strikes it, and it starts pouring water out of it. So I say all this to just like I just don't understand the hesitation to see how fluidly the texts of the Bible move back and forth between what the gods are doing and what people are doing, what's happening
Well, see,
in
you're not
yeah.
both dedicated to a fairly literalistic reading of the texts, as well as their literal truth, as well as a tradition of Protestant theological reasoning that goes back to, a few centuries, that you all have to simultaneously incorporate into your reading of Job. That's, I think, where that's coming from. And I want to run
Yeah.
this is, I guess, a preview of my Bodhi Hodge series. It's probably going to come in like January or something because I'm kind of ahead. Uh, but like, let me run by roughly what I said, and I want to get your take on that. And so,
Okay.
for me, I said, yes, there is this category change here, but it's an escalation, right? God saying, well, I have control over all of these regular animals that you encounter frequently, right? Like you see bears, you see lions, you see ravens, whatever, that's fine. And sure, I have control over these, and you don't really, although, humans can kind of get control over these in certain ways. But not only them, I'm also in charge of these two colossal entities of near divine power that you couldn't even hope to control. And that's a natural escalation of God going through sort of the animate world, because he's already gone through the inanimate world, right? And now he's
It
going to the
absolutely is.
pinnacle of the animate world
Yeah.
to say, I have the power over that. And to me, that seems like a fairly natural progression, not some kind of weird subject change.
No, it's completely natural, especially when you understand it within this context where this movement back and forth
Yeah.
is part of that natural progression. So yeah, it's and I one of the things that made people in this um in this context so uh horribly terrified of and the one of the reasons why they had to attribute disaster to these cosmic forces that they then personified into these monsters is just because of how unwieldy so much of the natural world was for them.
Hmm.
Less so the wild animals and the animals themselves, they weren't a problem. What were they scared of? They were scared of storms, and they were scared of the sea. Right? Like
Yeah.
that's
The sea is
that's it.
scary.
I've
Yeah,
been
it is.
there. It can be,
So-
yeah.
And for the people in this region, like we really have to understand like where they're located here too. Like on the one side, they've got this vast, untracked, uninhabitable wilderness to the east. In the later in the prophets, when they're describing the threat from Babylon, it's always coming from the north, because the only way to get between Babylon and the region on the western shore of the Mediterranean was to go around
Yeah.
the untracked
Yeah,
wilderness.
you're not crossing
and
the
you
straight
came
west.
No, you are not, because that's not possible.
It's just
And then on
dirt
the other
and
side,
sand, like
Yeah.
and sandworms.
and nothing lives there, right? Well, except the sand.
Yeah, except Shadowlands.
And Behemoth.
Yeah.
and
And Behemoth.
Yeah. that's right.
So, and then, but this makes sense, right? Because then on the west side, you've got the sea, and you're stuck between these two unnavigable forces: the desert on the east, Behemoth, the great landlocked monster, and Leviathan on the west, the monster of the seas. So I don't know what else to say about that.
All
But
right.
so one more thing though I wanted to point out here.
All right, and then real quick, I do want to say, after you have the one more thing, we got one more message here to read, and then we're going to jump into a Q&A, which I'm hoping to have
man.
last for, I mean, obviously, if we run out of questions, we'll end it, but I'm probably not going to have it go much more than a half an hour. So
Okay, I might need to I might need to take a 2-minute
Oh, that's fine.
break before
Absolutely
we do
fine.
the Q&A. So just within this historical context, I'd mentioned that the Book of Job, if this is something that was put together in the exilic period after the destruction of Jerusalem, sometime in the 6th, 5th, 4th century, this is I think something important to point out is that this is the start of a really important theological shift that then takes place within what we identify as early Judaism, or even just the formation of Judaism out of these ancient Canaanite religions, right? So it starts with this theodicy, and the basic message of the Book of Job is just that, right? It's pull up your big boy pants and deal with it. It's shit happens to good people and bad people, and you just need to deal with it. You can imagine how unsatisfying this is as a response to just the way the world works. And it's within this context that people start to think about God. They start to think about the cosmos. They start to think about their place within the world very differently. God all of a sudden becomes this unfathomable cosmic being who has control over everything. I think this kind of starts in the Book of Job, but his plans for us are now for our benefit, for our good. We just have to wait. Ultimately, he understands what's happening. He knows what's going on. Things are bad now, but he is going to come and fix them. This is the beginning of what we call apocalypticism. Apocalypticism becomes sort of the dominant feature of what we know from Jewish practice, Jewish belief, starting in the Persian or maybe the Hellenistic period all the way through into the time of Jesus and then the destruction of the Second Temple. But I think when you look at the Book of Job, you're looking at kind of the development of these ideas at a very, very sort of early point.
Okay. Well, how about we let Dr. Davis take that break? I will talk about how we're going to run the Q&A, and when he's back, then we'll continue on with that. But in the meantime, Vishanti, would you like to read our message from Robert Madewell, since you are the more musically inclined of us?
God, I know this tune. Oh, Behemoth with a cedar tail in the merry old land of Uz.
There you go. Thank you very much.
Botch that.
I think it was fun anyway. Nee for $2 also says, even Fremen of Arrakis won't mess with a hippopotamus. I mean, if they could find one alive, there's not a whole lot of water for them to live in, but yeah, I would also doubt that they would mess with a hippopotamus.
This has to be a post-Paul Muad'Dib kind of
Yeah, this hippo. Is like the green Arrakis period when there's like the special sand preserve just for the sandworms, and the rest of the planet's nice and lush.
Yeah. But it was like, I'm just gonna preach a little while Kip's taking a break.
Well, real quick, I do want to get through the rules for how we're gonna run the Q&A.
Okay.
So the basic idea is, one, please tag me. If you don't tag me, there's absolutely no guarantee I will see or read your question. Do super chat if you want to jump in the queue, because I'm going to be reading questions roughly in the order that they come in, unless you super chat, in which case you jump to the head, and I will go through super chats in the order that they come in before we get to any other questions. So if there's at all a super chat question, it will be first before I get to further non-super chatted questions. But that doesn't mean you have to. Please feel free to ask questions and not pay for it. That's perfectly fine. So go ahead. What's your preaching, Vishanti?
What I was going to say is that there's a lot of people who have been very negatively impacted by a lot of evangelical Protestant theology. And Job is actually a really good book for these people because it's asking the same exact questions that we all ask, and it's giving you answers and theories in the voice of some of the characters in the story. Like, don't read this as literal history. It's an allegory, okay? Like, you have people who will experience a traumatic incident or an illness, and they'll start going, well, what did I do to deserve this? And the answers to those questions are given by the characters in this narrative. Like, one of the characters says, well, you must have a sin somewhere. I mean, you got to be sure. Look real hard. It might actually be your fault. And then, another character will go, hey, maybe God is just, doing whatever he wants. Another answer comes from God. It's shit happens.
Mm-hmm.
And those are questions that hopefully can put you a little more at peace with things that happen, because it's so insulting to have someone come up to you in your time of most travail and go, well, God just has a plan for you. You don't understand it. It'd be like, listen, you would be well within your rights to just backhand that person in the mouth, because that's not what you need to hear when you're having a tough time.
Technically, that counts as battery, and for legal reasons, I cannot endorse this action.
I wouldn't say that you would be legally within your rights to do it, but it would feel really good. But yeah, it's when you have these questions come up and someone starts...
if you're upset enough, they might understand.
They might understand.
Understanding, not guaranteed.
Understanding. But when you're asking these questions and you're so tempted to blame yourself, or people are trying to blame you, that's not going to help anything. And then you have... Again, I'm calling them characters because they're serving a narrative function. They're thematic ideas that are made into people. They're not real historical figures. Like, come on, let's be real about this.
Yeah, I don't even think they're supposed to be, they were ever intended to be historical
they're not,
characters.
Yeah, I would highly question that the author or authors meant for these to be read as literal people.
I generally object to people...
allegories.
I don't think so at all.
I generally object to people categorizing the Bible as fiction, because I don't think it broadly fits that category. But, I do think Job, in particular, does fit the category of fiction in that, like, the author not only knows that this isn't a true story, but isn't intending for you to think it is either.
Yeah, they're having the discussion of why bad things happen to ostensibly good people. They're having that conversation through these characters. These are not new ideas. Human beings have been wondering the same things ever since we
Yeah.
gained sentience. You know, you're not going to stumble on the answer today, just like they didn't stumble on the answer way back. You
It's
know,
always
and again, the
yeah.
answer is really from just an objective point of view. Shit happens. Nature is
Alright.
crazy.
Yeah.
Your
It-
fate is
yeah.
crazy. It happens. Like, figure out a way to make your peace with that.
We do have
And
to
if
get
it-
to the
you're-
Q&A pretty soon, though.
Yeah, if you're
Oh.
making your peace by going and getting sarcastic about it, that's completely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. First up, Trippy Liquids, who's been a member for 6 months and is at the Amniote level, says hi. Well, hi, Trippy Liquids. I hope you're doing well. All right. So John Smith asks, if Sodom was destroyed for sodomy, is there a Gomorrah, and what is it? I think the answer is no. But
No, there is not. It's
Uh.
it's all sodomy. So can I say something though about this story, which I'm sure this is stuff that some people, maybe most people in your audience already know of and have heard before, but it's unfortunate that we get caught up in the meaning or the purpose of the story behind sexual impropriety and deviancy. Fornication is always high. Well, this is and this is very much a Christian thing. In the book of Jude, I think it's maybe late 1st century, early 2nd century Christian text. This is what he says. He says, all them sodomites, they done got themselves killed by being a bunch of perverts. This is not the right way to read this story. When I teach my course, I have I have part of a lecture on this where I talk about this story within its actual context, which is all about the value of good hospitality within these ancient Near Eastern, possibly semi-nomadic agrarian cultures, where within this very inhospitable environment, if people couldn't depend on you to look after them when they were moving about and traveling or away from home, they would die. It just would. So this is life and death kind of stuff. Is looking after strangers, looking after people who are out and about. And this is the sin of Sodom. They were so inhospitable to these angels who came into the city. First of all, nobody but Lot is there to take them in and look after them. And then, they come and they want to abuse them, or at least it looks like they want to abuse them while they're in Lot's house at night. But something that is also missed in this story is that within the ancient Near East, that we have some texts from Mesopotamia and from Assyria, which indicate that it was not uncommon for someone who had committed a civil crime to be punished by being homosexually raped by the leaders, by the rulers of the city in the public square. And I think this is an important element of what's going on within this story. It's not like the men are just super horny for the angels. This has way more to do with the fact that they're just being so grossly unjust.
There's no way this is staying monetized.
We also,
I'm sorry,
no,
guys.
it's not your fault. Don't worry about it. It's YouTube.
In the modern age, we understand what's going on here, and I'm going to just put the spotlight on this. We understand what's going on here. The men of Sodom weren't homosexuals. They weren't gay.
No.
Here's why I say that. When you think about like the modern American prison system. Are those gangs homosexual? No. When you talk about like that scene from the Shawshank Redemption where the guys get, Tim Robbins' character alone in the washroom or the shower, it's not because they're gay. It's because they're trying to put him in his place, so to speak.
Mhm.
And that power structure and that sense of power and dominance, that is something we understand whether or not people want to admit it. And, evangelicals going, oh, it's because they were homosexual. No, it's because they were on a power trip.
Yep. All right. Savage
There you go.
Cobra, the cursorial angiosperm, for $5 says, do we have any indications of which Jewish text would be most contemporaneous with Job or philosophically/theologically similar?
Well, we have. There are certainly the book of Ecclesiastes bears a lot of similarities in terms of just the construction of the worldview, and also some of the construction of the language. Is this just a sorry, I want to look at this again here. Most contemporaneous with Job, or theologically, philosophically similar. So yeah, I would say Book of Ecclesiastes is the obvious one.
Mhm.
Now there are a handful of texts that very, very few people know about from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which bear some similarities to this as well. Things like a very popular text called Instruction has some of these elements of dealing with theodicy built into it. And yeah, that's a text that probably dates back to I think maybe the 3rd century BCE. One of the real issues here, though, is that when it comes to some of this literature, the stuff that predates like the Hellenistic period and also then postdates the exile is really, really difficult to pinpoint, in large part because there's not a lot of it, and also just because of the historical situation that's taking place within the region we know almost nothing about, because it was people just weren't writing a lot of this stuff down.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, hey, that's fine. So we have a $20 super chat from Dr. Tapioca Weasel, thank you very much, who says, terribly sorry if this has already been asked, but Job is often cited as the oldest book of the Bible, and I must confess that while reading it, it feels that way. Is it? If not, do we know what is? Also, Dapper, any plans tomorrow? And I'm going to really quickly answer that last question. I actually have plans later today and tomorrow. So later today, I'm going to be on Chesh's channel doing her sort of current events news recap show with Chesh, obviously, as well as Landon, Noel, and Maya. So go check that out. That'll be at, I believe, 3:30 p.m. Pacific, which is 6:30 p.m. Eastern, I think. And also tomorrow, I will be on Maya's channel with Dr. Tapioca Weasel, and we will be going over some creationist nonsense, which Dr. Tapioca Weasel, please feel free to link that in the chat, and I will pin it so that people can take a look over there. But now that I've finished that part, we have already addressed it, so I don't want to go too much into why we know that Job isn't the oldest, so we can just say no. But what is the oldest?
Yeah, rewind the tape. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is some of the oldest literature in the Hebrew Bible? There's not wide agreement on this. There are a handful of texts that we look at from a linguistic, philological perspective, and also just in terms of of how they align with elements of the archaeological parlance. Some of the oldest texts in the Hebrew Bible appear in some of the poetic literature of the Torah. Something identified as the Song of the Sea, which is in Exodus chapter 14, I believe, is widely regarded as one of the oldest Hebrew Bible texts. The Song of Devorah, which is in Judges chapter 5, appears to be very, very old. There's Genesis chapter 49, which features the blessing of Jacob onto his sons, is also considered very, very old. Now, in terms of when this stuff dates, that's more problematic. You've got some people think some of this stuff stems all the way back to, the early parts of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah in maybe even the 9th century. Others will say, no, none of this stuff started to even come out until closer to the 8th century when the Assyrians destroyed the kingdom of Israel, and there was this massive migration south to Jerusalem. So there's some disagreement about that, and then that further complicates the picture because we also have some texts from the Hebrew prophets, the early Hebrew prophets, like some parts of the book of Isaiah, the book of Micah, the book of Hosea. These all look like they were written maybe in the 8th century. And that could potentially be very, very early, maybe even earlier than some of these Torah texts. We really just don't know. And then I'll just say, from a physical perspective, from a manuscript perspective, the earliest Hebrew text that we have that aligns with what we have in the Bible are these tiny little silver amulets that were discovered at a place called Ketef Hinnom, which is just on the outskirts of the old city of Jerusalem. These are pretty interesting because they contain the priestly blessing from Numbers chapter 23. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine down upon you and give you peace. They are not identical to the priestly blessing. But importantly, these are also not indicative of the fact that somebody was copying this stuff out of the book of Leviticus, the book of Numbers. They're written on silver and then rolled up, likely as amulets, as like magic objects to protect a person from illness or from distress. And my thought is that this is part of a very ancient tradition that eventually made its way into the biblical text. And then after that, we've got the Dead Sea Scrolls, which date to about the early 2nd, maybe the late 3rd century BCE. But most of those texts are from the 1st century BC and the 1st century CE or AD. And there are numerous copies of texts from the Hebrew Bible, which all have their own interesting little features in them.
Awesome.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you. All right. Fear Electric Boopsmonger says, does Dr. Davis have any similar info on what the, quote, unicorns are that the Bible mentions elsewhere? I forget where exactly. And I do want to point out that generally, outside of the KJV, that the term is usually not translated unicorn, but yeah.
No.
Do you have any information on the identity of the animal that the KJV identifies as a unicorn?
I mean, I always understood this was probably a rhinoceros, but I don't know. I haven't looked at the text closely. I haven't spent any time with the actual language there. So I'm really, unfortunately, not what. Does anybody know it offhand?
So my understanding is that there is not a for sure consensus on this, and that there are competing hypotheses, none of which are that it's a horse with goat feet and a horn.
No, that's not what it is.
Yeah, that's, as far as I know, that's
so
none of the seriously considered hypotheses involve that. All right, Captain Ryan Ryder asks, I am asking Dr. Kip, okay, was not the ancestor of Hebrew in a dialect continuum with Phoenician?
Sorry, where is this here? I'd like to...
I can copy it into the private chat internally.
Can you?
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Absolutely. Give me a second. Let me just actually get it. Because for some reason, my mouse is being weird. What are you doing, mouse?
Uh-oh.
Oh, I just deleted it. No.
Quick, Bish, sing something.
Here it is. There it is in the
we
internal chat.
We are the priests of the temples of spirit.
There we go. Oh, was the ancestor of Hebrew in dialect continuum with Phoenician? Yes. These are all, in fact, so we have texts from the Iron Age region So this is like the, from like 800, maybe 900 BC up to like 600 BCE, written in what some scholars will call Phoenician or Canaanite, and this always gets distinguished from Paleo Hebrew
Oh God.
almost entirely on the basis of this idea that Paleo Hebrew texts came out of Israel and everything else was Canaanite. But in actual fact, it's the same thing. Like it's Hebrew is Canaanite, is Phoenician. I mean, there's some minor differences between certainly like between some of the Phoenician texts and the other Canaanite texts, but it's all, and these people were, I mean, of course, duh, like they're all living in the same place.
It's not a very big area
at the same time. It's not. So yeah, it's all the same thing.
Let's see. Vadim Slamovsky-Radchenko says, were Lot and his daughters presented as negative characters after their, quote, family time, end quote?
Well,
that's an interesting question. I would say oftentimes now people need to understand that these are stories. These patriarchal narratives are all really interesting because they have to do with explaining, where we came from and how we're related to these other people who were around us. The offspring of Lot's daughters from this union are Moab and who's the other one? But they're bad.
So, they're the ancestors of enemies of Israel.
Yeah, so they're the ancestors of enemies of Israel. So this is an indication to us, largely that this is, and it's not, stories in which women are taking control of their sexual agency within this ancient context are not often. This is not often viewed as a positive thing.
Yeah.
The way the world was meant to work was men, men had sex. They penetrated, I'm sorry. I'm making it worse for the.
We've already got.
Yeah, the Rubicon has been crossed. It doesn't matter at this point.
Yeah.
So men penetrated women. This is the way sex worked. It had, a woman's choice or her agency or her control in this was not viewed as a part of the process. It was viewed as an obstacle to be overcome, which is why very often you have it couched in this perspective where, Lot's daughters have to get their father drunk in order to have sex with him. Rebecca has to actually engage in a deal with her sister in order to get Jacob to sleep with her. So it's very transactional, and it's not always a good thing. So where did that question start? Oh right, yeah, Lot
and his daughters. Yeah,
sorry.
So
yeah,
overall,
it's
yes,
probably not great.
Yeah. I would say even today, that's not a story that we would come out with saying like, oh yeah, that was good. That was a good thing that happened.
No, but maybe like I think from a modern perspective, these are the sorts of things that we probably need to think more carefully about, because these are instances where women are doing what they feel like they need to in order to in order to survive, in order to because bear in mind, within this story, Lot's daughters and their father are convinced that
there's no one else.
They're the last people on Earth.
Yeah.
Which is honestly super dumb because they knew they had neighbors. Come on.
And yeah,
where do you think Lot's uncle lived? My goodness.
Yeah. And it is true that the preamble to them doing this is them saying, well, we need to have kids. what are the options?
What are we
Well,
gonna do?
we don't have a lot.
Yeah.
So
But I'm literally on that same topic. I am begging people to learn what etiology is and how it's used,
Right.
because one
Yeah.
of the most blatant ones is in Genesis, when it's like explaining the curse. Like, oh yeah, Eve, your husband's gonna rule over you. That's literally the etiology for why patriarchy exists.
Mhm. By the way, for those of you who haven't learned what ideology is, it's a mythical interpretation of the origin of some state of affairs or thing. There you go.
Nice. Thank you.
Vagri says, Dark Dinosaur, I have a question for the panel, so this is for all of us. How much do you think most modern readers miss, fails, or fail to understand about the Old Testament because of their lack of knowledge of Near Eastern mythos? I mean, I don't know how to put a number to it, but it's probably a lot.
It's high.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Most.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how you actually access the text with anything approaching a reasonable amount of understanding without knowing about just the ancient Near East, like cosmology, conception of reality, ideas about how they treated deities and other divine or semi-divine figures. Like the whole of what Christians will call the Old Testament is just suffused with these ideas, and if you're going to ignore them, I don't understand how you even can pretend that you're getting anything close to an original meaning out of it. And if that's not your goal, then I mean, okay, whatever. If you have some other goal in reading other than understanding what the authors meant, I mean, okay, fine. I guess you don't need to know what they meant.
No, it's super helpful though, I think, for even constructing forms of meaning from the text for Christians and for people of faith. So like I've taught this stuff. I've taught this stuff in university. I've taught this stuff in Christian university. I've taught this stuff in state schools, and on multiple continents, and in virtually every single class that I have ever taught, I'm constantly blowing people's minds about what's going on in the text. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about how little people really understand this stuff.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that one of the neatest things as a teacher of this literature is watching the lights go on, and then seeing people come to an understanding just about how much cooler this literature is than you ever imagined.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
so
like it.
I've got a.
It sucks for people who have a structure that they feel tied to, where the more they learn about the history of the text and the history of contemporaneous cultures, that it just completely shipwrecks their entire life and religious worldview. Because I used to be one of those people, but now I'm in a place where my textual study is enriched, and it's made even more edifying now that I know, oh, these are themes from this culture, or this was a common idea in the region, or here's the historical polemic behind this particular story. It makes the text come alive in a way it didn't before. And it doesn't require any sort of mysticism involved.
No.
I love accessing the mystic side of textual interpretation, but this history has made my studies just cooler, and it's made it way more enriching. So if anything, this has helped my study rather than hampered it.
So we got a couple.
I mean, I know.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm having a really good time, so I don't care how long you go. I mean, me personally, but so one, you're constantly dealing with creationists, and you're constantly attempting to enlighten people of faith about evolution. So one of the things, so when I taught this stuff in a Christian university, one of the things that we had to do was to make this work within some sort of Christian context, which kind of sucks, but then it's also really good because it helps you think very, very creatively about the text, which is, I think it's important.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that within our modern culture, we're so two-faced about some of this stuff, where we've developed these systems of value, whereby stuff that really happened, real history, is somehow much more valuable and meaningful than fiction. And yet, the only way most of us access this stuff is through going to movies,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Or reading stuff that's based on true stories.
It's like every horror movie that has nothing to do with real life, but that's based on a true story. Like, why? Why are you doing this?
Why?
And
Yeah,
the
like-
answer is people think it's more important. So they go to see it if it says
Yes.
based on a true story.
Yeah. And it's like,
Yes,
why are you writing
but-
about it if it didn't really happen? Because humans like to tell stories. I don't know what else you want us to say.
Weird,
like,
right?
And we still do it.
Mhm.
Like,
We do.
It's produced a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
That so that's the start of my rant. But so within these Christian contexts, when I used to teach kids raised in evangelical households about what's going on in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, in particular with Genesis chapter 1, one of the things that I used to say is, this is a triumphant text from an evolutionary perspective. We don't have to see these things as in contradiction with each other, even though there's no evolution in Genesis chapter 1. But what I used to teach my students was that you can start to think about this story as a call to civilization,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah. Subdue
about
the earth.
Yeah.
yes,
Order from
and
chaos.
that doesn't. I mean, certainly we have committed all sorts of we have caused all sorts of problems for ourselves because of the way people have abused this idea. But this doesn't have to be a bad idea either, right? Like, I mean, that's where civilization came from.
Yeah.
It came from learning how to control natural forces that were beyond our control.
Yeah.
And that can be a wonderful thing.
In fact, actually, one of my
anyway.
favorite Christian interpretations of Genesis 2 actually comes from Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople, who's written numerous books based on the stewardship of nature that humans are given in Genesis 2, and pointing out just how badly humans are screwing that up right now, and that maybe we should get things like climate change and pollution under control, because it's almost like God gave you this dominion not so that you could wreck up the place, but that so you could like steward it and take care of it. And that's actually been a fairly controversial thing from him.
There's a large contingent of Jewish rabbis that would agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's had meetings with plenty of relatively important rabbis and stuff, because
Not surprised.
Yeah, there's been interfaith dialogues on things like environmentalism. All right, so we have a couple more super chats to get through, and then we are going to wrap up. I'm going to tell you what's coming up here. Get what's going on with Vishanti and Dr. Kip in the near future, and then what I would like everyone to do is to hop over to Chesh's channel, where I'm going to be doing the news recap in about an hour. So first, for $2, Buy and Finish Journey says, shout out to Dr. Kill, which isn't a question, but thank you.
Thank you.
Nee for $2 said, did Delilah cut off Samson's hair or his balls?
So they're pretty importantly connected in an ancient Near Eastern mindset. I'm just going to do a book plug. If you haven't already read it, people really need to read Francesca Stavrakopoulou's God
Oh my
and
gosh,
Anatomy.
yes. Yes.
Which is not just a. So this is not just a book about the physicality of God in the Old Testament. This very much is a book about worldview and Israelite religion and Israelite history, and it's one of the most brilliantly written books on certainly at a lay level about the topics of the Hebrew Bible that I have ever read. And this is an important point that she returns to over and over again within this book is how important a lustrous head of hair is within this ancient Near Eastern culture as a sign of one's sexual dominance and his virility. So I don't think it matters whether she cut off his hair or his balls. The effect was the same.
Symbolically, it's about the same.
Yeah.
All right, now, real quick, Savage Cobra, the cursorial angiosperm, just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you very much. They went to Borg Emporia, Vadim, Slomovsky, Radchenko, James Duncan, Binge Thinker, Crypto457. So thank you very much. Now, we're going to get to the wrap-up. Tell us what you're up to. We'll start with Vishanti. Vishanti, what are you up to in the near future, next week or two?
Recording more voice work for Kip if he wants. I'm
There you
gonna
go.
probably do another collaboration with Fossil Daddy because
Awesome.
grifters be griftin'.
Which,
so we're
by the
working
way,
on another.
if you haven't
another
seen
thing for
that, go check
Oh,
out Fossil
so
Daddy's
fun.
YouTube channel,
Yeah.
because Vishanti did a great job with that one. They took a look at L.A. Marzulli and his
that guy.
very
So much.
obviously taxidermied monkey bat fairy. That,
Oh my God,
he
it was so
paid
bad.
through the news for. He paid through the news for, yeah.
The guy who sold that or gave it to him is actually behind the current craze of alien mummies that were found in Peru, but
course.
talked about Mexico, Jaime Malsania. Like I said, grifter's gonna grift, so we have to come back to these guys periodically.
My son sent me a link to that story a couple
It's
days
so
ago.
It's so
dumb.
bad.
Oh my God, it's so
Is
bad.
this
But
true?
oh my God, no,
I
it's
love
not
that
true.
all the veterinarians were just like, yeah, this is a monkey stapled to a bat. And they were like,
Yeah.
are you sure though? Maybe it's actually
the
a
alien
fairy.
bodies. The alien bodies is literally like when you take an alpaca and you cut off the brain case and you just put a bunch of diatomaceous earth on it and make it look like it's so bad, y'all. Like, it's so bad.
Wow.
So that's what I'm kind of cooking up.
Okay.
I do have some things in the works. I've decided to alter my channel's trajectory a little bit. But I'll get more into that at a later
So you're
time.
moving away from cat video.
No, Kitty will stay there as a memorial, but
Okay.
yeah, and I did want to address a couple of Vadim's comments real quick. We were talking about understanding historical context as like a way to read, and he was asking me like, hey, can we really do that? One of my favorite writers has an essay explaining how people of generation following his couldn't understand Gogol's comedies because the cultural context was lost to them. You can get things out of text without knowing the context. You can totally get things out of it that are meaningful to you and enlightening, but think about how much more you'll get out of it when you understand the context. You know, it's not like you can't understand it at all. It's just you're going to understand it better.
And look,
when you have that background.
Some of the context is
But
probably forever
importantly-
lost. I mean, there are probably
Yeah.
some things that we'll just never understand about the context of these ancient texts.
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
But importantly, if you're ever going to write a peer-reviewed book about these texts, you do at a minimum at least need to know how to read them.
Yeah.
in
Wait,
their
Are you saying that
Richard Carrier.
Is there someone else who's been commenting on these texts without being able to read the language involved?
Yeah, but somebody else read them and he read that.
I actually had someone comment on,
Clown.
like, I offhandedly in one of my videos disparaged Richard Carrier for being unable to read Hebrew and yet thinking that he can write scholarly books about Hebrew texts. And someone's like, well, I didn't know you needed to read Hebrew to be a scholar. It's like, to be a scholar, broad sense, no. But if you want to be a scholar taken seriously when talking about Hebrew texts, yes, you do.
Yes,
Dude,
you
I
do.
told Richard to his face that he didn't know, well, digital face. I told him in the chat, like, he didn't know what he was talking about because he couldn't read the original language.
Yeah.
And he just didn't have anything to say about it.
Yep.
So, again, what are you doing?
All right, Dr. Kip, what do
Sorry.
you have coming
Yes.
up here in the next week or two?
Right. So in the next week or two, I'm working away on I have a long form series all about the Dead Sea Scrolls called the Dead Sea Scrolls Unapologetically. Vishanti has started to do some voice work for me for those. There's a video that's just available on my Patreon now, in which I explore the idea of the fulfillment of prophecy and the way that people who wrote these texts understood scripture relative to history and the future. So that's going to be, I'm going to be publishing that sometime next week. But there's going to be more videos coming. The next one after that is all about bad apologetics in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some of it has to do with the way they think they see crucifixion in the Book of Psalms, and some of it has to do
it's
with
Psalm 22, isn't it?
yeah,
For
and some of it has to
fuck's
do with dating of the Book of Daniel by using the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, that
And
reminds
then-
me. The JWs came to my door a while back, and they were like, look at all these numerical
lucky you.
interpretations of Daniel. That's significant. And I said, that does sound significant, assuming that Daniel is a mid-exilic and not post-exilic text. Why
Right.
do you think
Yes.
that? And they were like, well, we're really good at research. We're going to come back. And that was like 5 months ago. They haven't darkened my doorstep
weird.
since then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
weird. I was
And if you're
hoping
gonna-
for their good reasons to take Daniel as a mid-exilic
Any-
text.
Anytime someone starts saying, "Oh, well, Daniel predicted the crucifixion because from the time that you build this thing and you start pressing them on what year it is, they
Hmm.
can't ever give you a
Hmm.
solid answer."
Yeah.
And I just
No.
think about Rabbi Tovia Singer, who I can't recommend all of his material. He's an Orthodox Jew who happens to have some really bigoted
Orthodox.
views, but
I've read
But
some dumb stuff, but
his
I've also not some dumb stuff. So, you know.
oh my god, his rant about Christians trying to misappropriate the Book of Daniel to date like the crucifixion in the temples and all this stuff,
Ugh.
it is so good.
It's,
It is so good. I could listen to him rant about
Yes,
that
it
for
is.
ages because he has such a good, condensed version because he's had to say it so many times. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
So there's a bunch of stuff coming
Okay.
about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the way I've done my series is if you're interested in any of this ancient kind of literature, if you're interested in history, not even just ancient history, but the way I've structured and I'm building this series is telling the story of the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is pretty phenomenal and fascinating all on its own, but
Yeah.
dovetailing that with what's in the text themselves, I think it's pretty cool. So there's a bunch of stuff coming up in that series. I'll have in a future video, and I'll just kind of tease it. There's a couple things I've got going on where I'm going to be doing some comparison to the literature in the scrolls with the Star Wars films, and there will be a
Ooh.
special guest.
Apologia.
I'm not saying anything,
Okay.
but
Okay.
maybe. And then we're gonna get into some amazing texts about the backstory of Noah. And what a
Ooh.
freaky deaky kid he was. Yeah, within from all of this stuff comes out of the scrolls.
Just
It's
talking
all pretty
about the
fascinating.
origins of Noah with somebody on Dan McClellan's server this week. This is going to be great. Oh my god,
hey,
I'm so excited.
excellent.
so-
So, and I've got lots of reading parts for that one, by the way.
Woo!
couple quick things. If one of my
Yeah.
mods could quickly put the link to Chesh's stream in the chat, because I don't currently want to try and grab it while I'm also trying to do the live stream, because that's been requested. I do know that it was linked earlier, but I don't think I can find it quickly enough to pin it. Also, Nee for $2 says, will we find a Marcionite Bible outside of the Vatican? I mean, I don't think we'll find one really inside in the sense of an actual manuscript made by Marcion
Probably
or
not.
Marcionites. I mean, we know
Thanks.
more or less what would be in there because we know what the canon of Marcion was. So if you want to read a Marcionite Bible, I mean, just read the few books that he included, which is basically part of the New Testament.
Yeah.
Is basically it.
Yeah.
I tell you what, we will find in the Vatican basement the freaking menorah. Give it back.
Yeah, but what we'll find in some Ethiopian
Probably,
basement is the
yeah.
actual Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, the actual Ark of the Covenant,
It's
which is totally
tot-
radioactive, you guys.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably something
to-
radioactive there because all the priests keep dying.
Yeah, right.
They had to renovate that place pretty recently, didn't they?
I don't know. I haven't
Because,
I don't know
because the
either.
roof was caving in. Oh.
I mean,
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. Like the roof caving in.
that
but
sounds like something
they'll
that might
probably
happen.
just cover whatever box is in there and
I gotta say,
I
squirrel it
guess.
away.
if I were in Ethiopia and on a tour of churches, I would be more interested in the awesome monolithic churches than the alleged resting place of the Ark of the
Oh
Covenant.
my god. Oh,
yes!
the mud churches?
No, the
Yeah.
ones that are just carved
Oh.
into the rock.
Yes.
And it's
Yes!
all
Yes.
one
So
piece of rock.
cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We need
It's
to learn
incredible.
more history of Aksum. It's so good, y'all.
Yeah.
God.
And like the legend is that like they're all placed so as to make like a rough map of ancient Jerusalem, and like they're
right.
all
Yes.
like
So
yeah,
cool.
it's very look, if you're ever in Ethiopia, check out the monolithic churches. It's probably the coolest church that you could go to, because what other church has ever been carved out of a single piece of stone? The entire thing, no seams.
Well, there is-
Church, no, but temples in India
There
and
is-
like
yeah,
Southeast
yeah,
Asia, yes.
that happens too.
And in Jordan, there's
Petra.
Petra. which
Petra is very cool. Yeah.
So cool.
Look, these are all places that I would like to go if I had
Clearly built by aliens.
time
and
and
alien
well,
intervention.
obviously. Yeah.
If you do have lots of time and money, anybody in your audience, I will be leading a tour
Oh.
in Palestine, Israel, this time next year.
Nice.
I think it's pretty expensive.
Time to
though.
save. Hey,
Time to
we're playing
save.
Sugar Daddy.
Time
Yeah.
to save. I'll be there with the amazing Dr. Jennifer Bird, who also has
love
a channel here on YouTube,
Yeah.
and Dennis R. McDonald, who is an Old Testament a New Testament scholar, retired now. Used to teach at Claremont Grad School, but
This is
has
so cool.
some really
Awesome.
awesome ideas about the relationship between the Gospels and Greek
This sounds
mythological texts.
way
Oh my God,
cooler
it's
than the tour that AIG did of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So I got to say one more thing about this. It was originally scheduled for spring of 2024. It's been bumped back to the fall of 2024, and I'm a little bummed about that, because I discovered that we would have been on our tour of Palestine at the same time that Christian heavy metal supergroup Stryper
Oh my
was
God!
going
Yes.
to be doing
Oh my
was going
God.
to be doing their
Freaking
Holy
Striper.
Land tour,
Holy
which
crap.
was hilarious, because somehow they thought it would be a good idea to schedule their visit to the city of David on Shabbat.
Just like a Christian.
Of course.
Right.
By the way, if you could give us the info on where would we go to find info on this tour?
That's through Myth Vision.
Okay.
I wish I had the link. So
If you send it to me
Myth
later,
Vision
I can make sure to
podcast
add
is-
it.
Yeah, I can. But it's gonna be fun.
In other words, check back in a few hours or to a few days, and there should be a link. All right, so I'll just go through what's coming up on this channel real quick. So today, by the way, is September 16th, Saturday, 2023. On Tuesday, the 19th, I have confirmed with Maddie from Science Side Up that we're going to be doing Matt with Maddie. We will be continuing to look at a talk given by, or not a talk, but an interview given by the one and only Raw Matt.
Uncooked Matthew.
Uncooked Matthew. Yep, he's
An ordained.
an ordained
Essene.
Essene. It's true. Yeah, he
He's
put
an
that.
ordained-
I sent you that. I sent
Oh,
you the.
yeah.
An ordained
Yes,
Essene. Yeah.
Yes.
As if that made
That's
any
right.
sense at all. Yep, yeah, the ordained Essene, Raw Matt. Also certified in every system of herbalism around the world.
It
Certified.
tracks though.
Freaking
Guys,
incredible.
the Essenes were no fun.
No, they weren't.
It's true. They weren't.
They-
Sounds
I
terrible.
get it. I get it.
Ascetics and
Yeah.
stuff. They're no fun.
Look, I also know some ascetics who are also occasionally fun. So you could be a fun ascetic. You just
Not
can't
the
be fun all.
Essenes, though.
No, not
they
them.
Were
No,
so
not them.
aesthetic. They were
Not
like, screw
them.
you guys. We're gonna go live in the wilderness.
All right, on Thursday the 21st, I am
They're all going to
premiering.
use the same toilet. Sorry.
I'm premiering 3
and died
ways.
of dysentery as a
I
result.
tell you, have
Yeah,
died of
seriously.
dysentery.
So on Thursday, I'm releasing 3 ways to lie about human evolution. It is a supercut of the late David Menton's talk and answers in Genesis about human evolution. My favorite part is when he puts his hand over the the forehead of a human skull to show how globular it is,
Oh,
and then the
God.
orbits of a chimpanzee skull to show you how flat it is.
Yes,
despite
it
the
was
fact
so
that
dumb.
The
Ugh.
orbits of the forehead are not the same part of the skull, and he's very obviously holding different parts of the skull in his hands. And it's like, come on, dude, what are you doing? Anyway,
Again, it's the triangle meme yet again.
Yeah. And so
Well-informed, honest creationist. Pick 2.
yeah, that's as many as you get. You can pick only one, which also some of them have done. Some of them have only picked one. So let's see. On Saturday, I actually don't know what's happening next Saturday. We're going to default to a Dapper Reacts, to which Vishanti is, of course, invited. So, yeah, that's going to be...
That's Shabbat Shuva. I don't know what my plans are yet.
Yeah, that's why I was, Vishanti is invited. She may or may not be here. Which, by the way, since it is, in fact, a new year, Shanti,
Woo!
can you ring in the new year for us in a very effective and traditional and
Yes.
perhaps even loud way?
Well, I'm
Yes,
not blowing
please.
the shofar. If that's what you
Oh,
want.
come on.
Sorry.
Blow the shofar.
Listen, I'm fine with bucking rabbinic tradition in some respects, but I don't think I should do it on air. But like, Lashana Tova U'Metolka, like,
Okay.
happy 5784, you guys.
All right. And Strawberry Dapper Sinus Pain says for $2, thanks for coming, Dr. Kip. This was fun. Thank you, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Please do check out
This was
Chesh's stream. Yeah, I had fun. All right, we're going to get out of here, and Happy New Year.
Woo, Lashana
Happy New Year.
Tova, woo.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Denny5252, Eleron Teller, Phil Rivara, Ian Chen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babby, Monkey They Them, Mrs. Spexinder, The Venerable Bead, Sphincter of Doom, and Star Runner. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.